This week, top executives from the U.S. financial sector announced they're about ready to ruin the world again. Representatives from all major banking and investment institutions said that more than enough time has passed since they last caused a major global economic meltdown and confirmed they're pretty much fully prepared to bring about a brand new worldwide financial crisis.
We feel like we've given people enough time to get comfortable again. Consumer spending has increased, housing market has rebounded. So yeah, we're all set to go ahead and ruin the global economy again.
And in other news, the perfect gift for a local man is unfortunately a gift certificate to Lowe's Cinemas. Mall shoppers look on in awe as a helpless 15-year-old girl is viciously torn apart by a pack of her peers. And a drunk pilot decides to pull over onto a cloud until he sobers up. You will now hear 3 gong strikes and a recitation of the great chant before being ushered to the hallowed garden. For more, keep checking theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. And 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Jay Noon.
And me, remotely from Honduras, it's Mark Edge.
And we have a lot to talk about tonight because Texas's governor, Greg Abbott, put out a pretty interesting notice, paper, where he basically sounds like he is hinting at being pro-secession, at least pro-states' rights. And we want to talk about that. I also have some news from Argentina about Milei. It's only interesting, and Milei is the anarcho-capitalist president of Argentina. It's only interesting because they have an anarcho-capitalist president, and I'm really interested to see what, if anything, he will do. So I have some news from there too, but I think we should start off talking about the Texas thing because I think a lot of people want to hear about that. Mark, did you have a story about that? I have something here if you want me to read that.
Yeah, I've got this one I think is sort of a follow-up to anything you might have because this is it's released by the Republican Governors Association. 25 Republican governors released the following joint statement in support of Texas Governor Greg Abbott's Texas constitutional right to self-defense. And 25 governors, none of them of border states, besides Abbott, obviously, but he didn't sign the document supporting himself.
New Hampshire's a border state.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
Yes, terribly sorry.
One.
None of them. The problem with the Canadians sneaking across the border is entirely different. But yeah, it's not a southern bordered state.
Okay.
They fit in a lot better than the people coming over the other border.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's just Canadians that are even coming over the Canadian border, right? Couldn't anyone come over there?
There are certainly people sneaking across the border, or the Canadian border. I mean, if you've got a country of 300 million people, somebody's bound to sneak across. But last I heard, there were people sneaking from the U.S. to Canada. So, I mean, who knows? It's been a while.
Well, what are they supporting him for? Well, I can read what they're supporting him for first if you want, because Greg Abbott,
you read yours first.
He put out this really interesting statement, and I could probably read some of that even. It's right here. I don't know what else you'd call it. It's just his statement. It says, Governor Greg Abbott, January 24th, 2024, so it was yesterday. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. The result is that he has smashed records for illegal immigration, which really surprises me because his stance on illegal immigration seems to be a lot harder than Trump's. Like, forget about the words they say, the words that come out of their mouth. More people are getting deported, and it's harder to get over the border now. So it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm suspicious about all this. I'm not some kind of like Greg Abbott fan. I actually hate him.
Why's that?
Well, because I lived there while under his boot in 2020, and he ruined my life by all of the restaurants. I mean, not restaurants, bars in the San Antonio area came together and they were like, no, we're not going to close down. This is ridiculous. This is going to put us out of business. And Greg Abbott, along with the feds, swooped in and, forced them to close. He is not pro states' rights. He's not pro business. He's not pro humanity and freedom just because of this one thing he might possibly have right. He is a bad guy.
As almost all governors are bad guys. You kind of have to be bad to get into that political position.
I bet. Yeah.
I mean, look what they just did with Carrie Lake, where they're like, hey, don't run. We're going to pay you all this money. What do you want? What's your thing? I don't know if you guys heard about that.
No, I don't know who she is.
We'll talk about that later, maybe. But she ran for governor of Arizona last time around.
So what are they talking about here? I probably should get into that. Basically, apparently Texas itself is involved in the securing of their border with Mexico. So they have their own cops there. They have their own supplies, like they use razor wire, apparently, which I think is inhumane and wrong. But apparently the other thing about it is, like, it doesn't hurt anyone because they just know how to get around it. They, like, put something on their back and crawl under it. It's not that hard. But Texas does this themselves, right? And the feds said that they have the right to go in there and remove the razor wire. And
this is amazing.
And I think that that's really messed up because the federal government shouldn't have the right to go do that. And the thing is, like, I'm not pro-state at all. I don't really believe in a border. But even if this is the subject that gets people starting to realize, like, the feds shouldn't be allowed to do that, the feds shouldn't be allowed to tell states what they can and can't do, I'm honestly happy that the conversation's getting started.
There's a video of a loader, what you would call like a payloader. A thing, a loader is like a tractor that is used to put dirt, for example, in the back of a dump truck. They call it a loader, the articulated loader. And it's got forks on it like a forklift, but it's a loader, a wheel loader with forks. If anybody wants to internet search what a wheel loader is, it'll pop right up. And there's video of the feds, this Customs Border Patrol, whatever they're called, going up to the razor wire with this loader with forks on it and lifting up the razor wire, letting all the people come in. And there's also video. It was James O'Keefe was on with Luke Rudowski the other day. Luke Rudowski's actually been doing a really good podcast a couple times a week, like an hour, 2 hour long form podcast, which I've been begging him to do for a very long time. And he had James O'Keefe on the other night, and they were talking about how they met these guys down in Arizona that were basically just keep on going back into Mexico and coming up through the border, collecting $2,200, collecting a smartphone, and collecting like an EBT card or something, or some kind of food card. And one guy was bragging about, I've done this 8 times already, in the past month. They just, they're just giving it out. And, the Biden administration is encouraging all of these people to, come up to this country and get free things. You have like a George Soros linked some kind of organization that is funding and sponsoring and like paying money to for bus companies and like rail transport of transporting these migrants from wherever in South and Central America right up to the U.S. border. It sounds like a classic invasion, to me.
What it sounds like is a grift. If if you're going to give away money to people who manage to cross the border and then make it easy for them to cross the border, they're going to do that. This is where I depart with the people who are pro immigration, is where they give anybody money. Look, as far as I'm concerned, people should be able to come to the United States. They should be able to work their asses off like everybody else's grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents did. And they, should be able to build a life for themselves. This whole getting free stuff because, you've got problems in your home country or whatever the situation is.
I feel like that doesn't isn't as common in like with like people coming over from Mexico as it is like people who literally get shipped here from like Somalia. Like they literally get handed like a package and it's different. Like
the Hondurans know the system. Look, I don't blame the stray cat. Okay, this is important. If you put a bowl of food out in front of your house every day, and then you go bananas because stray cats come and eat the cat food, or raccoons, or whatever the situation is. Oh, I can't believe it. Well, stop putting the bowl of food out in front. It's not the cat, and it's not the raccoon's fault. It's your fault. And so I don't blame anybody who takes the opportunity, who takes the free phone, who takes the $2,200 or whatever the amount of money is, who takes the free place to live. They just shouldn't be offered. Look, if you can't find a place to live, if you don't have the money to find a place to live, you shouldn't be coming.
And the thing is there can't be open borders with prohibited drugs and a welfare system.
Prohibited drugs is a big one because
they can smuggle drugs up. It's such a huge incentive. If
just gives like a reason for there to be a black market on drugs, which is dangerous.
So as long as we have drug prohibition and as long as we have welfare, there just can't be open borders. The real solution is to this. We wouldn't if there was no welfare mechanism in place whatsoever on a government level. I can tell you right now, this welfare system, this fact that everyone is going to be given some kind of entitlement, has really, really trashed society, even among Native Americans. And when I say Native Americans, I'm talking people born here.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have there's just a lot of people like this. There's a plethora of single moms that have babies from multiple daddies, and they're rude, they're arrogant, they're entitled. There's a whole bunch of them, and I know some single moms that have babies from multiple daddies that are like work hard and they're trying to do the right thing and they're polite and they're pleasant. But if before there was a government welfare system, you had local welfare. If you were, if Jane O'Doyle, had 4 children and her husband, Patrick O'Doyle, lost his job, working at the factory. There wasn't 100 years ago, there wasn't a government welfare system for that. There was the church, there was the neighborhood, there was the community. But if Jane O'Doyle is a modern day crack whore and, is literally just, siphoning off the system or just being lazy or just trying to, get whatever she can, nobody is going to give the local drunk, the local crackhead, a welfare check. And so like I've been saying before.
Except the government.
Well, except for the government, yeah, but nobody's just going to give them a handout. So, and if you're like a miserable, nasty, wretched woman that's just, nasty and mean, the government doesn't care. They're still going to, give you this money, but your local community isn't. So when you have to be like, there is an incentive without the welfare system. There's a greater incentive to just be a better human being, because the bottom line is for some reason you can't take care of yourself and your family for some reason, and there's no government, socialist welfare system to rely on. You are going to be at the mercy of your community, and you better. It really helps just to be polite. And the other thing is, this welfare incentive is. I believe that the Biden administration, Health and Human Services on the federal level, is absolutely responsible for the death and murder of anybody who dies coming across the border, anybody who is killed by a coyote, any woman who is raped, any young child that is, put into the adrenochrome extraction factory.
Yeah, the kids in cages. I just don't believe that there are not politicians going and picking a kid out, and, adrenochroming.
Or whatever, yeah. Or
what
is this? Hold on, I have never heard anything about what you guys are talking about.
So,
kids in cages, adrenochroming. I've certainly heard about kids separated from their parents at the border. That was happening under Trump. I don't know if it's happening under Biden.
No, it's happening more now. That's the thing. Like, forget what they say. Forget the words that come out of their mouth. Biden is worse on immigration. It doesn't make. I don't understand why it doesn't get on the news. Like, there are more kids in cages. There are more people getting deported. But for some reason, he's making this stance, and it feels contrived. This whole, all of a sudden, just, pulling up the razor wire stuff. I feel like this is all set up for a reason, and I think that the reason is to make...
It's bizarre. And, the one thing I want to say about this is that the United States Constitution mentions that the federal government, and remember, this is a really important part of it, is the United States Constitution has 2 amendments to it that are very specific, that anything not mentioned in the Constitution are rights remanded to the state and to the people, which means that they aren't rights of the federal government. They are not powers of the federal government. And the United States Constitution says nothing about border security. So one would presume that border security is remanded to the state. It is, after all, their state line, and they are states. And the definition of a state is an organization that has a monopoly privilege on the use of violence in a given landmass. So therefore, Texas, best I can tell from a constitutional standpoint, Texas is the organization that is supposed to take care of border security. The United States has the right to, or the power to, handle naturalization, but that's making someone a citizen. And that doesn't really have anything to do with what's going on in Texas. So I support Greg Abbott and putting back the razor wire if that's what he wants to do, because I think that is fundamentally the job of the state, that, everybody chooses to live in there in Texas. Now, personally, I think that there ought to be an entirely different system, but that kind of falls under naturalization as opposed to falling under, securing the state borders. So I can see why someone says, look, we need a better immigration system. And until then, we're going to put pressure on the federal government to take care of it. But that's where I'm at on it.
Well, if you don't know what we're talking about with the adrenochrome thing, that means that it's something that is a conspiracy theory, sure. And I know Mark hates conspiracy theories, but me and Jay love conspiracy theories. And basically the idea is that there's this drug that can be extracted from a child's blood when they're being tortured, so they get so scared that
this is glorious. Keep going.
It's scary.
So they're so scared that adrenaline and whatever is cortisol or whatever is going through their blood, and when you take their blood at that exact moment and inject it into yourself, it's like a crazy drug.
Yeah,
okay.
And the claim is that
right.
Hillary Clinton and George Soros and the rest of the pedophile elite are very, very much into this adrenochrome. It is a euphoric thing for them. There's claims it is the fountain of life. I just internet searched it, and they're all right-wing conspiracy theories, QAnon, Pizzagate communities. Oh, it turns out a lot of the Pizzagate stuff was pretty accurate.
Yeah. And the other thing about it is apparently the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is supposed to be about adrenochrome, but in the movie it's like they pretend it's some other drug, but apparently it's all about adrenochrome. So if you watch that.
Well, I read the book, and they didn't mention anything about adrenochrome in it, but
no, it's like a metaphor, I guess.
Okay. I can't remember the author's name, but somebody's screaming it at the radio right now. Anyway, I just want to set the stage for what we're talking about here. Hadn't heard about the adrenochrome. I think that the Mott and Bailey situation here, the sort of with the conspiracy theory situation, is that certainly Epstein was contracting with 15, 16, 17, maybe 14-year-old young ladies to be prostitutes on his airplanes and things like that. And that is used as an obvious statement of the elites are pedophiles. Okay, you win. That seems clear. But then, there's more to it that seems far less proven, which is to say that the elites are kidnapping children. And I don't know. I mean, I'm open to any information that we might have, but I mean, even ever since I was a kid, there was always like the satanic cults are kidnapping kids, and there hasn't been a lot of proof for it.
Well, 800,000 kids a year ago missing in the United States.
And why does the United States...
nothing in the media about it.
Why does the United States want to separate these kids and their parents?
There's 300 million, 800,000, so that's 1 million. There's 300 million people in the United States, 300 and call it 25. You're talking about a large percentage of kids go missing.
Yeah, it's an alarmingly shocking high number. I was just reading some statistics about this I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and it was like 800,000 kids went missing or something in, I don't know, 2020. When one of the first things Biden did when he came in was basically dismantle Trump's, pedophile whatever task force. I mean, there's just all kinds of nonsense, with these guys. And there's all kinds of reports that migrant children are just being loaded onto airplanes in the middle of the night in Texas and being flown to like unknown, locations. There's reports of these airplanes landing at like Chicago O'Hare Airport, and there's a bunch of, what are being just called migrant or like brown colored children, being, ushered off these, planes and, put on the buses and the tarmac and, just leaving. They're everywhere.
GlobalMissingKids.org says that in the United States, an estimated nearly 500,000 children are reported missing each year. Now, reported missing could mean a kid that is reported missing and then found within hours, days, or weeks, or whatever the situation is. So I tend to think that most of them are returned. Look, I don't know any of this, stuff. This is all largely news to me because it's not my world. But
do you know that when a child goes missing that is in the custody of Child Protective Services in any state in the country, they are not reported missing. They are considered runaways, even if the child is an infant?
Say it again.
If a child goes missing that is in the custody of Child Protective Services,
sure,
they are not reported missing.
I'll bet they're not. I mean,
they are considered runaways, even if it is an infant that clearly can't run away.
Whoa.
Right.
That's and that's the thing.
I don't know whether
I
they're
feel like
considered. I wouldn't consider them to be runaways. I would consider them to be in custody. Now, I'd be very concerned about it, but yeah.
Just like this locally here in New Hampshire, there was a girl, Montgomery Harmony. The girl's mother was going crazy saying, I haven't seen my daughter in 2 years. Where is my daughter? Where is my daughter? And like, they're like, oh, you're crazy. Psychiatric evaluation for you, lady.
Wow.
And this is New Hampshire Child Protective Services. I got a real good education on this by just internet searching the term settlements, New Hampshire DCYF. You take your location and type in settlement, your state abbreviation, and CPS.
CPS, yeah, whatever.
And you're going to see just newspaper article after newspaper article after newspaper article about how Child Protective Services paid this family $5 million, $3 million, $7.5 million. All of this crazy sums of money. The reports I have for New Hampshire that since 2012 to last summer, I forget the exact date, that New Hampshire's Division of Risk and Benefit, who settles all the claims against the state of New Hampshire, paid out over $300 million in a decade to settle claims just for one division. That one is called Division of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, because, they are just losing children, because they are just giving children to rapists and pedophiles. They are just damaging and hurting children. It is insane what is going on with our kids, and there's no real media coverage of it.
And wasn't Harmony Montgomery, wasn't she found buried in the backyard? Dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no doubt that kids die in foster care and things like that, and it's a tragic situation. And I am deeply concerned about Child Protective Services and their penchant for taking kids away from families where there doesn't seem to be any problem at all. They may not fit in to whatever the local societal norms are, but everybody who's listening right now who's over 70, they didn't raise kids the way that's normal now either.
Well, when we come back, we're going to talk more about this Texas versus the Fed situation. So don't go anywhere. 603-283-6160. You can bring up whatever's on your mind. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up.
Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it'll cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you're feeling so inspired. You'll get a special membership badge that's visible in the Odyssey chat room, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click join today.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Former US President Donald Trump says he made defamatory remarks whilst in the White House to, quote, defend himself, his family and the presidency. Testifying in a New York courtroom, Mr. Trump insisted he didn't intend to cause harm to E. Jean Carroll. He'd accused the writer of making up a sexual abuse claim against him for financial and political reasons. But he says he stands by his denial of her allegations. Our US correspondent Benji Heyer reports.
Donald Trump took to the stand for just a matter of minutes in a trial to decide how much he should pay E. Jean Carroll for defaming her, something a separate jury found him liable of last year. His comments were brief. He wasn't allowed to offer any testimony explicitly saying or even implying that he didn't sexually assault Miss Carroll. While this is a civil case, Mr. Trump also faces 4 criminal trials as he vies for the Oval Office again. Yet rather than hampering his bid for the presidency, his legal woes seem to be driving his campaign forward, branding himself as someone not just being prosecuted, but politically persecuted. The jurors in this trial return on Friday to hear closing arguments.
Meanwhile, one of former President Trump's aides, Peter Navarro, has been sentenced to 4 months in jail. Mr. Trump's longtime trade advisor had been found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for not appearing at a hearing of the House committee investigating the January the 6th insurrection. Caroline Malone reports.
Peter Navarro had ignored House representatives who'd compelled him to testify before the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack, and he was found guilty on 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress. His lawyers argued that President Trump had directed him not to comply with subpoenas. He should be protected due to executive privilege. But the judge in the case rejected that, saying the words executive privilege are not magical incantations. Navarro has asked that his sentence be put on hold while he appeals.
In France, large swathes of a controversial new immigration law have been struck down by the country's Constitutional Council. Many of the measures had been added by the country's far right, which is gaining popularity among voters. Tony Waterman has more from Paris.
35 measures were either struck down or partially rejected, which is about 40% of the bill. This includes the tightening of access to social welfare benefits, the establishment of migrant quotas, and restrictions on family reunification. The far right has called the ruling a coup, with the support of President Emmanuel Macron. But experts say this is no gift for him either. He lost a lot of support defending the measures, seen as a way to woo conservative voters ahead of June elections. The ruling cannot be appealed, and many on the left are calling for it to be scrapped altogether.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSL.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash, Digital Cash. Tired of the ever-inflating US dollar? You can live your life on Dash with bitrefill.com, where you can buy gift cards from big retailers, including grocers, gas stations, phone refills, Amazon, and even prepaid MasterCards. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. That's dash.org. And here on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie,
Jay Noon,
and Mark Edge.
And in the last segment, we were trying to summarize basically what is happening in Texas right now with Greg Abbott, the governor, putting out this statement that is really kind of spanking the feds. And I can't say that he's wrong at all about what he's saying. I am very suspicious of his motives. But let's get into this article from thehill.com. It says Abbott doubles down on border invasion declaration after Supreme Court blow. Texas Governor Greg Abbott on Wednesday accused the federal government of breaking the compact with the states following a Supreme Court ruling on Monday that cleared the way for the Border Patrol to remove razor wire installed by Texas along the U.S.-Mexico border. In a statement, Abbott said President Biden has refused to enforce immigration laws and has even violated them. It's the latest escalation in a legal and political standoff between Texas and the federal government, though Abbott stopped short of announcing any specific measures. Yeah, he just put out like this statement. He has been pushing...
Well, they also reinstalled the razor wire.
Okay, yeah, that's a specific measure. So after the government or the feds pulled it up, Texas put it back?
That's my understanding of the situation.
And I heard a report today on traveling into Keene that the Texas is offering private landowners, ranchers, to install that are on the border to install razor wire free of charge on their lands, which I thought was pretty cool because the migrants are definitely wreaking havoc on private ranches. And, some of these guys, they got 10, 12,000 acres of, desert, which isn't nearly as, good a cattle grazing ground as acres in New Hampshire or New York.
But, the realtors prefer if you call it arid grasslands.
Yeah, it takes 9 acres to support one cow if you get some rain.
Well, it does look like we have a caller on the line, and that's what Free Talk Live is about. 603-283-6160 is the phone number. You can call if you'd like to get in on the conversation with us. Unscreened caller, what's your name and what's on your mind?
Hey, this is Rusty from Portland.
Hey, Rusty.
Hey, Rusty.
I just had a quick comment about the immigration thing.
Go ahead.
Well, in the United States right now, our birth rate is only 1.67 births per woman or whatever. And you need to have at least 2.10 to even keep the population stable or where it is.
Yep.
So we're not having enough babies, basically.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And that's a problem in a lot of places around the world, first world countries, definitely like Japan, South Korea, China, etc. And so we need as much immigration as we can possibly get. We obviously don't need to be giving them welfare, but I feel like if we don't open up the borders, we are going to have way too many old people and not enough workers in no time at all, and our economy is going to go over a cliff.
That's one thing I always like to bring up whenever people are like, oh, Bonnie, you and the other people who don't have kids are ruining the country because the country's not having enough kids. I'm just like, okay, open the borders.
Yeah.
Do they all have to look
Right.
like me? No.
Yeah.
I think that the United States really misses out on opportunity here. So the United States is pretty widely known to have the best universities, or at least the most best universities of any place in the world. And, the idea that we're taking people from foreign countries, letting them, get an education here and then sending them home doesn't make any sense to me at all. It seems to me that they should be actively attempting to get people who come to university to move to the U.S. These are going to be high earners and people who, make the country great, as it were. Whereas,
Well, they have to go through so many hoops. I mean, if you change your major or something like that, then you have to redo your whole visa. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the powers to be don't want this country to be strong. In fact, there was an article I'd read a while ago where some German family was getting deported. And they were like, the father owned a business, the mom was like a teacher, and they had some kids that they weren't born here in this country, but they basically left Germany due to, in Germany, you couldn't homeschool. They left Germany and seek political asylum here like 15 or 18 years ago because they couldn't homeschool their kids. and this was a Zero Hedge article, actually, I believe. And the Biden administration had basically, ordered them to be deported because, they were useful, productive people. And, the Biden administration, who is, essentially bought and paid for by, the entities that hate the United States, that hate freedom, the Chinese Communist Party, the Ukraine crime families, you have all of the connections there with all the money going to, getting to the Biden family, from these entities. And what are they doing? They are seeking useless people, useless eaters, the parasite class to come here, calling for them to come here, and incentivizing them to come here. And just like I say that Health and Human Services is, in New Hampshire is responsible for all of the people overdosing on, the fentanyl and the heroin, in Manchester and Concord, because, all the first responders I talked to were like, yeah, they all got EBT cards or all on welfare.
Probably messes up their actual brain chemistry, where they're just like, oh, I don't need to work to get anything done. I'm just going to take this pill to get a, know.
Yeah, like a lot of the old people I deal with, the 70-year-olds that I buy hay from, for example, and do livestock business with, they're all old. None of these guys are young and spry. And they got their dopamine hits as little kids from working on a farm. So that's what they still got cows. They still got sheep. They still are into that stuff. They still love making hay. And, and a lot of this younger generation, has gotten their dopamine hit from an internet device, which is basically the same thing as doing cocaine or, even heroin. And so now when you got a whole bunch of 30-year-olds, in Manchester that are, basically getting a welfare check, and I say Manchester, I'm talking about Manchester, New Hampshire, just go walk around, and there's a whole bunch of 30, 40-year-old homeless dudes that are clearly just whacked out on drugs. Mm-hmm. And then they're all collected.
And I can totally see that just not working would make people that way, because when Ian first went to jail, I just wanted to do nothing for a while, and I started to feel really depressed and stuff. And now that I am in my acceptance stage, as Mark says,
me too. I'm trying,
and I'm just trying to do more things. Like the other day, I went to Jay and Shallon's, well, it's really Shallon's hearing, and I helped Chris Wade record, and it was just doing that was a total actual dopamine hit, unlike just sitting in my house playing Virtual Villagers on my phone. So
an earned dopamine hit.
Virtual Villagers.
It's an app. It's a really old PC game, but you can get the app, and you have to make your villagers survive on an island. I deleted it.
Good for you.
But is there anything else you want to say about that, Rusty?
Yeah, there was one thing that pissed me off. A few months ago, I literally saw people protesting on the corner outside the grocery store with signs telling us not to have kids, and that having kids was a bad thing for the planet, and you should just not have kids. That was their protest, and I just worry about what's going to happen.
They should kill themselves.
Thank you.
As a protest. Thank you for the call, Rusty. I really appreciate it. But every time I see people saying that people living on the planet or cows living on the planet are the problem, I'm just you should lead by example.
Yeah, one of these psychopath parasite types at Davos was woman was, I forget, I think she's a president of the EU or something, or EU something. And she was like, oh, fishing is, killing the fishing, farming, basically all the stuff that I do, is destroying the planet, is destroying humanity. They call it ecocide or something is a name they come up with it.
So she's saying fishing is killing the planet.
Yep, fishing and farming.
Well,
yeah, just feeding people, right? They don't like that much.
Yeah, they want you all eating Bill Gates's lab-grown, genetically engineered, 3D printed plastic.
It looks like births per 1,000 people went from, in 1950, 35,000 births for 1,000 people. That can't possibly be true.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Maybe that's 30. Oh, that 35. Those are points afterwards. Excuse me. 0.000. 35. Those Europeans and their funny use of commas.
Yeah.
Right. So 35 per 1,000. to today. This is global, so up to this is projected. Current is 17.299, so 17.3.
Is this
today.
a year? In 1,000 people, only 17 have a kid a year. I guess that makes sense.
In 1,000 people, there's 17 births per year globally, and then they expect that to go downward. So yes, there is a dramatic drop off in births, and one thing we've got to ask ourselves is, what is innovation going to look like in 2100 when there are what looks to like 11 or 12 births per 1,000 people?
Can be a lot of cheap houses.
Right. They'll probably be falling apart. As well as I do, if you don't live in a house for a year or two, it's almost trash.
My goodness.
Almost has
Just
to be
a
knocked
year?
down.
Be a lot of free fixer-uppers out there.
Just a year.
A couple years, yeah. Especially if you don't winterize a house up north here.
Oh yeah.
And then and let's say it's the power is still on, or it's hooked up to city water, and then it warms up, and then the water just starts going and going and going, because the pipes break and just trashes the house. Yeah, a house is just wasted in one season. Sure.
It can be, yeah. And I mean, certainly, if you're talking about, say, Detroit, where people are going in and ripping out the copper and things like that, you basically just have a barn left.
Well, before that conversation got started, we were talking about what's going on in Texas with Governor Abbott speaking out against the feds. And it says that Abbott, has been pushing constitutional boundaries on state versus federal jurisdiction of border and immigration enforcement for the better part of 2 years. His legal team, including State Attorney General Ken Paxton, first publicly toyed with the idea of formally declaring a border invasion in 2022. What would that even do?
Well, I guess it gives the governor the ability to take the National Guard and station them at the border and attempt to, stop people from coming across, or whatever the situation they decide.
It enacts some emergency powers.
That's what
I'm
I was
sure.
thinking, yeah.
And probably comes with some federal stimulus money, or the ability to commandeer some private property or whatever.
I wouldn't count it on this go around. It doesn't look like the feds are going to give them a single penny.
Yeah.
But it's also an election year, so the Republicans obviously want the Republicans to win, and so if they're able to make it seem like there's a gigantic border crisis, then they'll get the Republicans out there voting away and that kind of thing.
I guess that's the thing. We have a caller, a listener, and his name is Sheriff Hathaway. And he is the sheriff down in a border county in Arizona.
Santa Cruz.
Oh, that's the county, right?
Yep.
And he says that there is no such thing as a immigration crisis. He said there's just not that many people coming over. And you would think, if they're going to come over somewhere, they would be coming over every little spot they could come over, not just Texas.
Well, they're coming over where the George Soros-sponsored caravans are dropping them on the Mexican side of the border. So they're probably not dropping them on the Santa Cruz area. And if you look at Santa Cruz,
but why? It would be easy.
No, actually it's like no man's land. So I don't know about the Mexico side, but if you just look at a map of Arizona, so my mom, I was sort of planning on going to Arizona this winter. I'm not actually, because I got other things going on. I'm actually we're going to Mexico, Acapulco, and Acapulco, yep. And then I'm actually going to go to Florida. I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to hang out with Luke Rudowski down there. Oh, and speaking of Luke, if you're into this Texas thing, Luke just put out a T-shirt, and his T-shirt website is thebestpoliticaltshirts.com, and the T-shirt says "I stand with Texas." And it's got a little, Texas with the, in the flag of Texas in the shape of Texas. And there's a Luke T-shirt. He's got great T-shirts on there, thebestpoliticaltshirts.com. Anyways, so my mom lives north of there. She lives outside of Tucson. And she's like, oh, that's no man's land down there. There's nothing down there in Santa Cruz County. And if you look at the maps, you'll see, there's not many roads on the maps, and it's actually very rugged country. It's sort of hard to navigate in general, and you wouldn't make it too far if you were walking around because it's like mountain desert. And I don't know what there is for infrastructure on the Mexican side of the border, but if anybody wants to check out, that, so that is the very southeastern corner of Arizona, Santa Cruz County. So I don't imagine there is much coming through there just based on the fact that there's really nothing there.
Well, it does look like we have a caller on the line. Unscreened
Sounds like
caller.
an easy play to sneak across.
Right. If there's nothing there, you would think that's an easy place to get across. But it is rough mountainous terrain. Like it is, it's difficult to navigate.
That includes that's just north of Nogales, and includes Nogales, Arizona. I mean, I-19 runs through this.
Well, we do have a caller on the line. Unscreened caller, what's on your mind?
Hello, my name is Itzy. It's your boy.
Okay, bye. Being really gross and weird. I didn't like that.
Yeah, I heard there was a lot of flooding going on in San Diego right now. That's kind of what I wanted to ask that guy about.
Oh, well, he's stupid, so he probably doesn't know anything.
Yeah, just a troll.
So we were talking about Arizona, and I don't really know for sure anything about that, except my little brother lives in Tucson at the whatever the Air Force base is called there, and he works on airplanes, and they have to go rescue people all the time who die in the desert. Like they go hiking by themselves and then they die. So I don't know. Maybe it's a bad place to cross. I don't really know. But I just don't want to just take the media's word for it. Like, oh, there are these caravans. There's so many people coming over. It's an invasion. It's like, to me, it sounds a lot like 2001. Oh, the Muslims are trying to kill us. They hate us for our freedom type of talk, Like when I lived in San Antonio,
they've been using the invasion rhetoric since for 20 years now. First it was the Mexicans, now it's the Central Americans, whatever the case may be. What it seems to be is the United States can't get its borders sorted in whatever way it's going to sort it. I personally would not, I do not support anything that looks like a wall or anything like that. It says, I think that we just need immigration policies that work for everyone. And right now, no one wants that. If the Republicans allow the immigration situation to get sorted, especially now, they're not going to win in November. So they're going to make it a huge big deal. We're all gonna die. Then the Latinos are coming, and if they don't do that, then they may not win in November. So that's the whole shebang here.
Yeah, and it sounds like something that they would totally do. It's like Henry Kissinger keeping Vietnam going for longer than it was supposed to, just because it helped his candidate get elected. I don't remember which candidate it was, but that sounds like something that they would totally do. Says,
Kissinger sounds like Nixon, be my guess.
Oh, yeah, I think it was. So it says that they were planning on declaring a border invasion in April 2022. In that November, Abbott wrote Biden invoking a state's constitutional right to wage war when invaded. Oh my God. Whoa, that sounds really bad. Like, we want to be in a state of war. Yeah, it sounds really bad. But he only made his official invasion declaration public in September. Since then, the governor has methodically increased the border enforcement roles of the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas National Guard, citing the constitutional authority for a state to defend itself against invasion. The other thing about it is the Constitution doesn't say anything about the feds having the power to do anything to the border. So, I mean, that should be like open and shut. I don't understand why the Supreme Court said anything.
Yeah, I'm in a very difficult position here because I disagree with Abbott on this particular issue. At the same time, I don't think that there's a border crisis and any variety of things. But at the same time, I feel like that is a purview of the state, not of the federal government. So there you go.
Exactly. I feel the same way. I don't want this to sound like I'm on the side of like, oh yeah, let's keep the Mexicans out and I hope they get cut up with razor wire or anything like that. I'm just not pro this small group of freaks in Washington, D.C. having the power to do whatever they want and gaining more and more and more every year. Like, this was never something that they had the power to do. And I am totally happy that Abbott seems to be pointing towards the idea of secession in his statement he put out. So I think that we basically set the stage for what's going on there. I'm going to read a little bit more of what Greg Abbott actually said. He said, despite having been put on notice in a series of letters, one of which I delivered to him, Biden, by hand, President Biden has ignored Texas's demand that he perform his constitutional duties. And in a way, I kind of don't like that phrasing, because in that way, he's not really saying, oh, we can do what we want. He's saying, like, please, federal government, do what, like, we want you to do. And it's like, I don't know, the federal government should just, like, not exist.
Oh, I'm completely used to anybody in the federal government not interpreting my not agreeing with my interpretation of the United States Constitution. But as far as I'm concerned, that document's all about plain reading, and the plain reading of the United States Constitution says to me that Texas has control of its border, that every state has control of its border, because the only thing the United States government has is the power surrounding naturalization, and all the rights and powers that aren't mentioned directly in the Constitution and given to the federal government are remanded back to the states and the people.
Yep.
And actually, Christopher Gronsky gets into this in some of his work. He's destinationsfreedoms.org is his website, but he talks about how basically before Civil War, there was no United States naturalization, really. It was each individual states that were doing that. And each individual state, the United States of America is a federation of 50 nation states. Every state is recognized by The Hague in the Netherlands as its own sovereign nation state. There is plenty of Supreme Court rulings. There's plenty of stuff to cite on this. New Hampshire is foreign with the respect of the District of Columbia or Massachusetts, for example. And the United States is only the District of Columbia. And that's a very clear District of Columbia, territories, and possessions. So that would be Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, and that's it. Or whatever other pair. But it's definitely not Texas. It's definitely not New Hampshire. Now, I believe the United States has invaded New Hampshire, has invaded Texas. For well over since the Civil War. The Civil War, basically, these states have sort of been acting, like they are subordinate to the United States, to where previous to Civil War, the federal government was subordinate to the individual states. Yep,
and I hate Abraham Lincoln because he totally did a bunch of power grabs during that war. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. You can call in with whatever is on your mind. More coming up.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Former US President Donald Trump says he made defamatory remarks whilst in the White House to, quote, defend himself, his family and the presidency. Testifying in a New York courtroom, Mr. Trump insisted he didn't intend to cause harm to E. Jean Carroll. He'd accused the writer of making up a sexual abuse claim against him for financial and political reasons. But he says he stands by his denial of her allegations. Our US correspondent Benji Heyer reports.
Donald Trump took to the stand for just a matter of minutes in a trial to decide how much he should pay E. Jean Carroll for defaming her, something a separate jury found him liable of last year. His comments were brief. He wasn't allowed to offer any testimony explicitly saying or even implying that he didn't sexually assault Miss Carroll. While this is a civil case, Mr. Trump also faces 4 criminal trials as he vies for the Oval Office again. Yet rather than hampering his bid for the presidency, his legal woes seem to be driving his campaign forward, branding himself as someone not just being prosecuted, but politically persecuted. The jurors in this trial return on Friday to hear closing arguments.
Meanwhile, one of former President Trump's aides, Peter Navarro, has been sentenced to 4 months in jail. Mr. Trump's longtime trade advisor had been found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for not appearing at a hearing of the House committee investigating the January the 6th insurrection. Caroline Malone reports.
Peter Navarro had ignored House representatives who'd compelled him to testify before the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack, and he was found guilty on 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress. His lawyers argued that President Trump had directed him not to comply with subpoenas. He should be protected due to executive privilege. But the judge in the case rejected that, saying the words executive privilege are not magical incantations. Navarro has asked that his sentence be put on hold while he appeals.
In France, large swathes of a controversial new immigration law have been struck down by the country's Constitutional Council. Many of the measures had been added by the country's far right, which is gaining popularity among voters. Tony Waterman has more from Paris.
35 measures were either struck down or partially rejected, which is about 40% of the bill. This includes the tightening of access to social welfare benefits, the establishment of migrant quotas, and restrictions on family reunification. The far right has called the ruling a coup, with the support of President Emmanuel Macron. But experts say this is no gift for him either. He lost a lot of support defending the measures, seen as a way to woo conservative voters ahead of June elections. The ruling cannot be appealed, and many on the left are calling for it to be scrapped altogether.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the future for Taiwan diplomatically on the world stage after the elections that took place there earlier this month. Taiwanese voters rewarded the country's Democratic Progressive Party with an historic 3rd win, precisely the result Beijing did not want to see. But China had a victory of its own up its sleeve by persuading the tiny Pacific island of Nauru to sever diplomatic relations with Taipei and restore them with mainland China instead. Bob McMahon is with America's Council on Foreign Relations.
This is part of an ongoing effort by China to pick off all of the countries that recognize Taiwan, and in so doing, once and for all, completely isolate Taiwan and continue what it hopes is an inevitable, inexorable path towards unification with the mainland. China's response has been somewhat guarded since the results, but it was quick to lash out at countries that were supportive of Taiwan, including the U.S., which in its response stressed it did not recognize Taiwanese independence, but nonetheless congratulated Mr. Lai on his victory. But also you had countries like Japan and the Philippines with pretty strong, robust notes of congratulations to the DPP candidate for winning, which brought an immediate rebuke from Beijing.
Nauru's government claimed it reached its decision independently, with no pressure applied by Beijing. Taiwan said it was deeply grieved by the decision. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our main news again. Former US President Donald Trump told a courtroom in New York he made defamatory remarks while in the White House to, quote, defend himself, his family and the presidency. One of the former president's aides, Peter Navarro, has been sentenced to 4 months in jail for contempt of Congress. And large swathes of a controversial new immigration law in France have been struck down by the country's Constitutional Council. And that's the latest feature story news. Kate Fisher reporting.
It's The Onion Radio News. God loses his decision-making coin. This is Doyle Redland reporting. The Lord God has confirmed that he has misplaced his special decision-making coin. The coin, a relatively unremarkable 1972 nickel, has been used almost daily by the Supreme Being for over 4 billion years for the purpose of determining everything from the direction of the wind to the outcome of history. The visibly distraught God added,
I have no idea where I put it. I remember flipping it last night for a couple in Monroe, Michigan who were trying to conceive a child, but I haven't seen it since.
God also said he hopes to locate the coin before 7:15 Thursday morning when United Flight 251 takes off from Seattle with actress Dixie Carter on board. Doyle Redland for The Onion Radio News, online at theonion.com.
This is The Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Jay.
And Mark Edge in Honduras.
And in the last segment, we were talking about Texas Governor Greg Abbott going up against the feds, saying that he has the right to secure his border, or at least the Texas border. And we'll get back into that, but first I want to tell you that Free Talk Live is brought to you by Forkfest, happening June 13th through the 16th at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Forkfest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Forkfest is decentralized, so there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. For more information and to connect with other attendees, you can visit the unofficial website forkfest.party. That's forkfest.party. And so we were reading this statement by Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, that has really gone super viral recently. I keep seeing it everywhere, and the reason is a lot of people think he's calling for a civil war. A lot of people think he's tipping his hat to the Texas nationalist movement people, the people who believe in secession from the United States for Texas. I'm not sure if I believe that, especially because he's like the head of the Republicans in Texas, and the Republicans in Texas are doing everything they can to stop the vote that the Texas nationalist movement is trying to get through the courts, or at least through the legislature in Texas. I don't really know how their stuff works. Even when I lived in Texas, I didn't pay attention to any of that. I could not tell you who was mayor of San Antonio or anything like that. I just didn't pay attention. It seems like so far away and not like related to your regular life.
Do you remember who played for like the Texas Rangers or maybe the Dallas Cowboys or,
I remember someone dunking. That
Okay.
was a Spurs player. I don't care about sports. No, I mean,
That's good.
yeah, I knew some Austin pop stars. That's all. That's the stuff I cared about way more than the governor of. Well, I knew that Greg Abbott was the governor of Texas, and I didn't like him because he sucks. But anyways, let's get back into what he said to the feds. He put out this statement, and we already started reading it, but there's a little bullet list here. It starts off saying President Biden has violated his oath to faithfully execute immigration laws enacted by Congress. Instead of prosecuting immigrants for the federal crime of illegal entry, President Biden has sent his lawyers into federal courts to sue Texas for taking action to secure the border. Bullet number 2, President Biden has instructed his agencies to ignore federal statutes that mandate the detention of illegal immigrants. The effect is to illegally allow their en masse parole into the United States. And bullet number 3, by wasting taxpayer dollars to tear open Texas's border security infrastructure, President Biden has enticed illegal immigrants away from the 28 legal entry points along the state's southern border, bridges where nobody drowns, and into the dangerous waters of the Rio Grande. Wow. So, I don't necessarily agree with Abbott on everything, and I just think it has to be said because I feel like this is part of the plan that they have. I think that, quote-unquote, capital they, want us to frame the idea of, secession and states' rights, that those are the same type of people that want Mexicans to get cut up with razor wire. So I just want to say that personally, I am pro-immigration. I'm pro-open borders. I also think that we should get rid of the welfare state. I understand that whole idea that the welfare state should probably go first, and that would be amazing. I would love for there to be no welfare. I would love to live in a city if there was no such thing as welfare. No homeless people.
An immigrant, when they come across the border, should be able to vote.
Sure.
Without being a citizen.
Sure, I don't care.
Yeah,
I do.
as long as they can't vote my rights away, I don't think somebody who's been living here their entire life should be able to vote. That I have to pay money for them to put because they're too lazy to educate their child themselves. I
agree with you
we
completely.
have a serious problem to where people can actually vote against our rights, which is very much a violation of what the whole purpose and premises of this country is. That's a whole different conversation that's really hard to actually get through in a show like this.
Yeah, I agree completely that people shouldn't be able to vote away your rights, but the operating system that we currently have has that as part of the has that as the basic function, right? And I can understand completely when people say, "Hey, I don't want immigrants because they're going to vote Democrat," which I interpret as taking more rights away from me, which seems completely fair. I think that there needs to be a compromise. The parties need to get together and they need to say something like, hey, people who want to, immigrants built this country, that, an immigrant, if they decide to come here, ought to be issued a blue card with some identification. They will take their little fingerprint or whatever the situation is. They can't, they sign an agreement that says, I will never be able to vote my entire life in the United States. And that they'll, not be eligible for any kind of, welfare or anything like that. And, there's probably a few more things that we'd want to tack on to that. But I think that would solve a problem. But the best I can tell, the political parties don't want to solve a problem. The Democrats want as many people to come as possible, so they'll vote Democrats so the Democrats can do what they want to do. And the Republicans want to say that all immigration's bad. And, they don't want to talk about economics and how having a growing population is important for a country.
And, speaking of Democrats, has literally become the party of mental illness. You just look at the kind of things that the Democrats squabble about, the kind of bills that they introduce, with, the whole gender nonsense stuff and the wanting, they're fighting tooth and nails. So there's, books like Genderqueer in the public schools that are, teaching kids how to, basically have, gay sex with their friends and things like that. And, the Democrat Party has become the party of the mental illness. I mean, these guys are just, absolutely unhinged, especially, within like the past 10 years, they've gone off the rails. And I'm going to run for a Democrat, actually, next time I run for state rep.
That will be really great. I would love just if you get in any kind of a debate.
Oh, yeah. And that's the only way I get in a debate, because I doubt they're going to vote for me.
Yeah. But one thing that I want to say is I think it's important that we at least have Free Talk Live on the air, because there needs to be someone who's out here speaking common sense. Like, I don't like the idea that if you're pro things that are good, like liberty and prosperity and freedom, then you sound like a racist. And the only reason that is because of this type of stuff that they set up. I swear that they set this whole thing up so that way now when people are talking about secession, it sounds like you agree with everything Abbott says. I hate Abbott. I really hate him. I hate the way that he handles all the border and everything. I just think that the feds are even worse. The feds are way worse than any governor.
What has Abbott done to get rid of welfare in Texas?
Probably nothing.
Right.
And I just really don't like him. The thing is, there's still like people dying all the time because they're trying to get over, and it's extremely dangerous. He's trying to make it sound like, oh, they're just blocking off the more dangerous routes. There was a bus in San Antonio that was found, or it wasn't a bus, it was like an 18-wheeler, is that what they're called, or is it a 16-wheeler?
Yeah, semi-truck 18-wheeler, yep.
So there was an 18-wheeler found in San Antonio in the summer, in the heat. It was locked in the back and abandoned, and like 30 plus people who were trying to cross the border were in it, and they died. They came over the regular port where you have to drive over, and they had a bunch of illegal immigrants in there, and then for whatever reason the driver had to abandon the truck, and he left it locked, and they all died of heat in there.
And every federal employee, everybody in the Biden cabinet that has anything to do with this immigration stuff, that has anything to do with providing an incentive or welfare for people to come over in this country, should be all charged with murder.
Seriously,
every single one of them.
Well, what if that happened during the Trump administration?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Great.
Every single one of them that provides an
Just want to
incentive.
make sure.
I don't care who they are, Trump, Bush. Put it this way: if you make it to the White House, you're evil. Good people do not get into the White House.
There
That's
does
the
seem to be a
bottom line.
selection process for evil to get to the White House. I mean, I'm not 100% sure that anybody that made it to the White House would necessarily have to be evil, but it seems like the process for getting there requires enough rings to be kissed that you can go ahead and be thrown in the evil category.
If you're not evil, they're just going to JFK you. That's the bottom line. I mean, you look at all the stuff that, Trump. Oh, yeah, he, got warp speed, get these, vaccines that are not safe, that, have no safety studies. Yeah, let's convince and entice and threaten, a bunch of people to take them. Let's drop bombs on people. How come Hillary didn't go to prison? How come he didn't, pardon Julian Assange? How come he didn't pardon Ross Ulbricht? How come
he didn't drain the swamp?
Yeah, how come the Federal Reserve, everybody involved in the Federal Reserve is not put in Guantanamo Bay where they belong? The list could go on and on. It's just, and I think this, a little tangent here, this whole thing with this, bringing all these indictments against Trump and all these things against Trump is to just make the pendulum swing so hard to the right. I've been telling people, wait till Nikki Haley's president. And when Nikki Haley's president and the pendulum swings so hard to the right, if you think you're, trans, you're some other gender or something like this, you're just going to get put in a mental asylum, when the pendulum swings so hard to the right. That's really the push that's going on. And there's a lot of people on the right that would rather have that, than the nonsense we got going on now. And it's just, I really believe that it's just a major pendulum swing to the right, to where all of the horrible diabolical things, the stupid stuff, the unhinged mental illness of the left is just push that as far as it is to the left, to the right, and just let your imagination run wild, and these evil diabolical people are going to do 10 times worse.
And that's why I think that we should all just leave each other alone. And that's why secession is a good thing. If you want to be a furry, you should be allowed to be a furry and live in a state where being a furry is legal and accepted and, funded or whatever. I don't know.
Shouldn't be funded because that requires threats and violence.
Yeah.
That's their business, isn't it? Right? Like that's the whole idea. If the furries are socialists and they want, furry funding or whatever, then that's their business.
They can fund it themselves.
And then New Hampshire should be allowed to be a place where maybe it's frowned upon to be a furry and normal people live here, and we don't all need to be connected through this thing called the federal government that just keeps growing larger and larger and impeding in our lives. And that's why I am talking about this statement from Greg Abbott. It's not because I hate immigrants. It's not because I'm completely pro open borders, like absolutely zero stopping of people coming over the borders. I'm just anti-welfare. I don't like people that don't want to actually make a living for themselves. Like, I would love to live in a city if there weren't bums on the side of the road. And if you hate welfare.
And if you don't incentivize bums, if you don't subsidize poor people, you'll have way less poor people.
Yeah.
And getting back to the furry things, like in a free society, if somebody's kid in the public school identified as a cat and demanded and then sued the school to have a kitty litter box put in the bathroom for the kid to do his thing in the kitty litter box because he thinks he's a cat, well, the solution is no public schools. And then that would be up to the mother or the parent to, that wants to, you to recognize their kid as a cat, for example, to find a school that will accept that, and it would be
or
some
do it at their own
private school,
house,
or do it at their own private house, or have their own homeschool. I identify as a cat or a chicken or whatever, mental illness group, homeschool, group or something. And but the idea would be there would be no public schools because when you send your kid to public schools, what you are doing is you are engaging in an act of aggression towards all landowners. Because if somebody doesn't pay their property tax, the cops kick in the freaking door and kick them out of their house. I know, I've experienced it once before.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you know, Jay? I'm not so sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think that we've mostly said everything that there is to say about this. I'll read this last paragraph here of what Greg Abbott said. He said, under President Biden's lawless border policies, more than 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed over our southern border in just 3 years. That is more than are they counting like people that get sent back and come back and come back? Because I've known people like that. Like, I'd be like, oh my God, he got deported. That's so sad. And he's back.
When I was in Colorado.
In like 2 weeks.
One thing that really upsets me about ICE, which is immigration something enforcement.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Immigration control enforcement, I believe it is. And they would show up to a poultry or a pork processing facility where everybody's doing a job. Everybody's being productive. And they would just round up all the people. Let me see your documents. It's Nazi freaking Germany. And they'd show up to these dairy farms and stuff, and these
super hardworking people
farms where just a bunch of dudes are just working their butt off. And ladies, harvesting the spinach, harvesting the celery. Whatever, and and then ICE comes in there and they round them all up. They stop all the production, and half of these guys have credentials that don't pass ICE. They get put up. They all get put on these buses, and 3 days later they're back at work. And I'm like,
it's just a waste of money.
Hector, how did you get back so quick? This guy,
seriously.
Hector, he got busted somehow. I don't remember what it was, but. He's like, well, I can't go back to work over there. Can I get a job from you? He's, telling, some of the guys I'm working with, and we're like, hey, yeah, man, you're awesome. And I'm like, you got back here in less than it was 72 hours. He's like, yeah, they took me down to the border, and he says, I just hit in a guy's pickup truck, and he gave me a ride across, and then another time he's like, one time I had to run through the desert. That was pretty hard. I don't like doing that. And and the guy spoke English really well, but he was back in 3 days. I'm like, whoa, the dude is so resourceful. And he's like, he wasn't like, oh, I've been gone for 3 days. I need to sleep. He's like, I'm ready to work right now. What do you want me to do? That's the kind of guy those are the kind of people I want in my neighborhood.
Right.
People are getting stuff done, and those are the ones that like government's going after all the time. And meanwhile, they're putting these other guys in hotel rooms and giving them thousands of dollars a month.
Yep. That's why I just think that the problem is not as much the people who are coming from Mexico. I think it's the people who are literally getting shipped in these programs being called refugees from like Somalia or wherever else in the Middle East, and they're actually like third world. Like Mexicans aren't actually third world, and they're like killing people, and they're totally freaking weird and probably don't belong here at all. They'll probably be happier in their third world country.
How many of these Middle Eastern folks, sorry, Mark, how many of these Middle Eastern folks, for example, have a loved one or a relative or an ancestor that got vaporized or lost their legs or some horrible disease or sickness, from a U.S.-made, munitions or bomb or act of aggression? You think they might just have a little axe to grind when they show up here? Hopefully they get over it and they're like, wow, I'm just going to make a better life for myself. But,
But not if they're part of these programs where they literally are being paid to be here.
Right.
What are you going to say, Mark?
Right. I think that's the real key to the problems going on in Europe is, again, I'm no expert in what's going on in Europe, but I really think that the deadly combo is A, unlimited immigration, B, payouts for immigrant families. That's not how we made America into what it is today by giving a bunch of free stuff. We said, hey, come here, help us build a great nation, or, whatever. You don't work, you don't eat. And I think that that's a great system, but, incentivizing people not to work has never worked.
I had a conversation with a friend in Massachusetts, and he is a Hyannis police officer. Now, Hyannis is like the Kennedy compound in Cape Cod is basically where Hyannis is where the Kennedy compound is.
What is it? That's a town?
Hyannis is a pretty, probably the most populated town on Cape Cod is one of them. It's, it's like 1/3 the way, up the arm. If you look on Massachusetts, there's an arm. That's Cape Cod. And basically what has happened is Hyannis, all of the hotels are full of migrants. They are all like the grocery stores down there, like in the wintertime, they sell probably 20 to 30% of what they sell in the summertime, because Cape Cod is essentially like a ghost town all winter. It's a summertime beach, vacation area. And the hotels most of them are closed down. Well, they're all occupied. They're all full of migrants. And my police officer friend, who I used to sell hay to, he was like, it is unbelievable. He says that they are constantly drinking. You go to any of these places, it is just booze and it is weed. And the dispensaries are the legal, marijuana dispensaries are the migrants are just, they're just making, the dispensaries are making cash, big time money. There are, and I don't care if you smoke it or if you drink. If I have to pay for it,
you're not working, yeah.
If I'm forced by gunpoint to pay for it, yeah, I care about it. But he says, anyways, that there's constantly fighting. He's like, there's attempted rapes. There's all kinds of gun violence. There's gunshots being going off. There's a whole bunch of Jamaican refugees. There's there's a big Jamaican issue down there. There is he was just kind of rattling off a bunch of issues, and he's actually thinking about moving to New Hampshire. He is working on selling his house. He was like, would you be mad if I came to New Hampshire and became a cop? I'm like, no, you're a good guy. I'd want to see a guy like you be a cop in New Hampshire. I actually would love to see free stater-minded people become cops, because those positions are going to be filled anyways as long as, this system's going on. So it might as well be liberty-minded people, hanging out in patrol cars and just helping people and not harassing people.
I agree completely.
There's also this park in New York City. I can't find where I saw the article about it, so I was looking for, but there's this park in New York City where there's migrants being held and not held, but put up in rooms in this building right across from the park, and they're just so bad. They just pee and poop on the streets and like leave cups filled with poop. It's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, those types of people don't belong in America. Like, if you want to poop on the street, you don't belong in America. I would be fine with us not being associated with San Francisco too for the same reason. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up. You can call in with whatever is on your mind. That's 603-283-6160. More coming up.
According to locals waiting for a 66 bus in downtown Chicago last night, a young couple was making out in the passenger shelter like they were in Paris or something. Onlookers spoke to reporters about the pair, who carried on their passionate embrace for over 20 minutes, as if they were in some sort of goddamn candlelit bistro tucked away in Montmartre.
It's been almost a half an hour and they're still going at it. It's like they think they're sitting on a sun-dappled picnic blanket in the Tuileries Gardens. I mean, where the hell are we? The Champs-Elysees?
The pair's marathon makeout session, which took place in downtown Chicago and not, as frustrated onlookers emphasized, on a cobblestone street in the city of lights, featured intense gazing, deep tongue kissing, and other gestures of affection typically reserved for a couple strolling down the banks of the Seine River.
You know, for a second there, I honestly thought we had all been transported to Parc Monceau, drinking flutes of champagne on a wonderful summer afternoon while being serenaded by a Parisian accordion player. But no, we're at a bus stop in Chicago.
This is the Onion News Network.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Former US President Donald Trump says he made defamatory remarks whilst in the White House to, quote, defend himself, his family and the presidency. Testifying in a New York courtroom, Mr. Trump insisted he didn't intend to cause harm to E. Jean Carroll. He'd accused the writer of making up a sexual abuse claim against him for financial and political reasons. But he says he stands by his denial of her allegations. Our US correspondent Benji Hire reports.
Donald Trump took to the stand for just a matter of minutes in a trial to decide how much he should pay E. Jean Carroll for defaming her, something a separate jury found him liable of last year. His comments were brief. He wasn't allowed to offer any testimony explicitly saying or even implying that he didn't sexually assault Miss Carroll. While this is a civil case, Mr. Trump also faces 4 criminal trials as he vies for the Oval Office again. Yet rather than hampering his bid for the presidency, his legal woes seem to be driving his campaign forward, branding himself as someone not just being prosecuted, but politically persecuted. The jurors in this trial return on Friday to hear closing arguments.
Meanwhile, one of former President Trump's aides, Peter Navarro, has been sentenced to 4 months in jail. Mr. Trump's longtime trade advisor had been found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for not appearing at a hearing of the House committee investigating the January the 6th insurrection. Caroline Malone reports.
Peter Navarro had ignored House representatives who'd compelled him to testify before the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack, and he was found guilty on 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress. His lawyers argued that President Trump had directed him not to comply with subpoenas. He should be protected due to executive privilege. But the judge in the case rejected that, saying the words executive privilege are not magical incantations. Navarro has asked that his sentence be put on hold while he appeals.
In France, large swathes of a controversial new immigration law have been struck down by the country's Constitutional Council. Many of the measures had been added by the country's far right, which is gaining popularity among voters. Tony Waterman has more from Paris.
35 measures were either struck down or partially rejected, which is about 40% of the bill. This includes the tightening of access to social welfare benefits, the establishment of migrant quotas, and restrictions on family reunification. The far right has called the ruling a coup, with the support of President Emmanuel Macron. But experts say this is no gift for him either. He lost a lot of support defending the measures, seen as a way to woo conservative voters ahead of June elections. The ruling cannot be appealed, and many on the left are calling for it to be scrapped altogether.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie,
Jay,
and Mark here in beautiful Utila, Honduras.
And Jay, you had something that you wanted to tell them?
Yes, Anarchapulco 2024 Reborn. I'm going to be there with my wife and kids. Somebody just donated a forge. Looks like I might be building an anvil when I show up there. I'm sorry. Somebody donated an anvil, and it looks like I might be building a forge. We're going to be getting there like 4 days before the event starts. But so I might be, I'm hoping we can pull off this blacksmithing there. That's going to be my workshop. But anyways, I will be.
That's expensive. I just looked up anvil.
Well, somebody donated one.
That's really nice.
Somebody involved, and with hoping to encourage me to put on the same thing I put on at PorkFest. I'm like, well, we need a lot more tools. They're like, send me a list, which I haven't sent them yet. I got to finish the list. Anyways, so Anarchapulco is happening February 11th through 16th in Acapulco, Mexico. I'm going to be talking about investing in our posterity. Marjorie Wildcraft will be there. I'm actually very excited to meet her. She is someone I've sort of followed on and off for years, and she's like an awesome gardener and really into like herbal stuff and tinctures, and she's just a great wealth of knowledge. Just someone that my wife and I are really looking to meet. Max Egan, we're excited to meet him. Jeff Berwick, of course, and Lucy. My kids really want to meet Lucy.
I would love to meet Lucy too.
We watch the Jeff and Lucy walk and talks together sometimes.
That's Jeff Berwick's dog. It's a Chihuahua.
Yeah, and he's got a baby boy who's like, I think I'm going to be about 1 year old, roughly, or almost 1 year old. Anyways, it's taking place in I can't remember what the hotel is called, but the Secret Garden is part of the hotel. It's kind of like an outdoor deal, and beautiful weather, beautiful time. In the walk and talk videos that Max Egan does and Jeff Berwick does, like everything's looking good. There's they're rebuilding everything. A lot of the hotels are open again
because there was a hurricane there.
Yeah, it was a hurricane a few months ago, Category 5. And if you're interested in going to Anarchapulco, there's going to be tons of great speakers. You should come check it out. And if you buy tickets, use coupon code J at checkout, and you'll get a 10% discount. And that's anarchapulco.com.
Thank you for that, Jay. We do have a caller on the line. Ricky from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Ricky, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you there, Miss Bonnie. Brother Jay, Brother Mark, good evening.
Good evening, Ricky.
What's on your mind?
No doubt. Well, before I go into it, I have to admit that, Miss Bonnie, you made me so happy tonight. I'm sitting here listening, and here comes Scooter, and you just blew him off completely. Now, he's totally banging his head up against the wall at that moment. No doubt. What the hell is wrong with this person? What rock? I remember when he just came from under some rock, and he's like a bad dream that won't go away.
Yeah, he's
Scooter
so
or Skeeter?
Skeeter. Yeah, I think you call him Scooter, but
I think he's an AI bot.
Hey, I don't know what the hell he is, but that I'd like to know what he does during the week when he's not pestering everybody on this program.
I can't even imagine. I don't want to think of that.
There's always some.
I know, but I feel bad for the people.
He's either an AI bot or like the FBI has like an allowance for like one individual at a time that they could put on a payroll that they're part of their job is just harassing Free Talk Live. I mean, there's always been some.
MK Ultra, he was just awakened and Harry appeared. No doubt. But on a serious note here, I hear you talking about secession with Texas, and it's very sad actually, because I do occasionally talk to people from Texas, and I've been talking to them because secession is something that's very important to me. And I will say it's a very different set of circumstances. But see, this is definitely, I totally agree with you, Miss Bonnie. This is a case of smoke and mirrors. Their government first of all, it's definitely not a representation of the people of Texas. That's obvious. And this is a case of smoke and mirrors. And I think really the reason why is, generally speaking, I find the people of Texas to be very strong people. I think this is just, an attempt to use secession. Okay, here we're doing it. We're going to do it. It's going to be great. Oh, sorry, folks. It didn't quite happen. And they're totally destroyed. And that's a good way to beat these people down,
That could totally be it.
That's just a thought on my side. And plus, they have statehood. And that's something I wanted to talk to you all about. You see, I've talked about my, plans on running for that seat in District 189. And my purpose, now I will do other things. I can't do it overnight in 5 minutes. But I will do it, is to blow it away. Now, the difference here, and I think Jay will understand what I'm talking about, here in the Commonwealth, as of 1787, we are what they call a pre-association. That's a caveat. We would have never ratified, because we would never hit the Union, just like so many, if we wouldn't have got our caveat, which is supposedly the non-interference rule of the federal government that comes to the people and the land. Now, not only that, but that coupled with the fact that we are the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I think gives us the ability. Now, I have much more in mind than I'm going to utilize. But my answer, as opposed to Texas or even New Hampshire, when we did it in the 90s, they used a liaison. And that's crap. That's the asking permission route. And we did get the Independent Sovereignty Act, so something good came out of it. You cannot ask the federal government. My answer is, once you have the people, say 60% or better, the house blows away in the middle of the night, boom, it's gone. There goes the Fed and the state with it. Now, I do have a plan, which I'm not really speaking about, because I want to give them a heads up so they can find a way to weasel out. But I will say it's involving our own Constitution, which I find novel from the standpoint of a constitutionalist, to use that to blow the damn thing away.
What are we blowing away?
The U.S. Constitution, Mark. You would love it. You're all there goes your income tax.
Well, I'm certainly not a fan of the income tax.
Income taxes.
Nobody is.
It's for enemies of the United States.
What's that?
Income taxes for enemies of the United States. If you read the Trading with the Enemy Act, United States citizens were included with the list of enemies of the United States, and when the Trading with the Enemy Act was amended in 1933.
Right. A lot of people say, okay, Commonwealth, what are you going to do if you blow away not only income tax, but you blow all taxes away? What are you going to do? Now, I know it sounds crazy, but I've done my own canvassing, and I do know the people here, the Commonwealth, quite well. And the answer would be, believe it or not, and I believe this would be successful, a voluntary donation, say of like maybe 2%. And it's not something you're obligated to do. And if you don't have it, it's not like we're going to send a Gestapo out for you. You pay it when you have it. There'll be plenty enough money. I mean, 2% doesn't sound like much, but we have 8.3 million people. It doesn't sound like much, but there's plenty enough to have it. And if you don't have it, you don't have it. Because people here love to be part of their community. And if people were willingly part of their government, as opposed to being mandatory, they would be very hip to it, And you don't have to pay it. It's not like you're forced. There'll be plenty enough money.
Well, I
think that any government that is voluntary is one that I'm looking for. Sure.
And I think that Javier Milei in Argentina is probably doing a much better job at getting his state closer to that than Ricky will probably be able to do from a Congress spot or whatever it is, congressional district spot in Pennsylvania. And I wanted to talk about that. Mark, I want to know, does anyone in Honduras talk about Argentina and what's going on there, or do they not care because it's still too far away?
I just spoke with an Argentinian this morning regarding what's going on there, and he voted for Milei,
nice.
But he's not excited about him.
Is it because of the protests?
I think he's mostly just something had to be done was the reason that he voted Milei in, is that everything that had been done up to that point wasn't working, and that he felt like he just something had to change.
I'm getting more and more actually excited about him. And I just think that the English news agencies aren't putting out like everything he's doing because they don't even want to bring attention to it, and it's like out of sight, out of mind. So that's why I asked about Honduras, because it's like people in America don't care at all. Probably half of them don't know what Argentina is, and I really want to get more information about him. But I found this. Apparently, there's been protests in Buenos Aires.
Yep.
And I looked it up. It's Aires. Wait, it's Iris?
Aires. Yeah.
I thought I looked it up and I was right.
Just gotta go fast.
Well, anyways,
just roll through it. That's what they do.
Buenos Aires in Argentina. There's been protests there, and it's so funny because it said at least 200,000 unionized workers of the country's 5 million or so will be marching in the streets of Buenos Aires today. And I heard I'm in a group chat on Signal, and a lot of people are in Argentina in that chat. A lot of them are saying that the reports were like 20,000 at the most. So like a tenth, right, of what they were saying, I think. And
yeah, it's a huge number of people though, but yeah.
Yeah, but still, it's way less than what they were saying. And those people are unionized workers who are mad because of the stuff that Javier Milei is doing. And that just sounds like a good sign to me. Unionized workers being mad sounds great.
Yeah, they weren't going to be happy. Basically, they've got the sweetest of gigs, and they want to continue to ride the backs of the disadvantaged Argentinians until the whole country is just ripped apart. And the union workers have long believed, been in bed with the socialists and believed that if we would just do socialism right, it will work. And I encourage them to find the place that does socialism right.
It's just like here in New Hampshire. The only people that dislike the Free Staters are the parasite class. And by parasite class, you don't have to be a government employee to be a parasite. In fact, even I've been finding a lot of the government employees that I do talk to that like the Free Staters and like what the Free State Project's about are like the guys who like work for the highway department doing road construction.
Those that plow.
Yeah, that plow, that do road construction, that people who like some of the cops that I talk to that have families, especially family people. I can't find any family people really that dislike the Free State Project. But it's very much parasite class, like people who work for the government, hardcore like leftist types, like the school teachers and the people who have they know their pension will not exist if the only purpose of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. There would be no government employee pension funds. They just would not exist because the only way those things can be propped up is by pointing guns at people and forcing them to pay for them. This is why property tax is so expensive and stuff.
And one thing that's really weird about the messed up economy in Argentina is that people who do basically anything productive are not the unionized workers that are making like any sort of money. Like the lowest paid doctors in the entire world are in Argentina. Like doctors in America
that's got to be the Cubans.
Oh, well, probably them. But I thought that it was I heard that it was Argentina yesterday.
It might be the industrialized world. Argentina is often grouped into the sort of G20 countries, the ones that are, big and productive. It was supposed to be the next United States in the early 1900s, and that didn't come about because, well, a politician or a socialist married an actress, and Argentina, took 120 years off.
Yeah, and like in one of these chat groups I'm in on Signal, there's like one guy in there who he really gets pissed when I talk about like why are you sending, I say only a fool would allow his enemy to educate their children or his children. And he's like, well, I work 12 hours a day, blah, blah, blah. But so I'm like, oh, well, if you have to work 12, if you have to send your kids to school because you have to work 12 hours a day, you're doing it wrong. So,
and I hate when people act like, oh, this is the job I have and it's the only job I could possibly have. Like, why don't you change stuff around?
So he's a union worker. He's got a Harley, like a brand new Harley Davidson. He's got like 2 jet skis, 2 snowmobiles. He's got a bass boat. He's got like $105,000 pickup truck. He's got like this huge, beautiful house. And it's like, yeah, he's just basically working his union job, paying his bills, and he's literally a parasite because in order to have his lavish lifestyle, he has to work 12 hours a day. His wife has to work 12 hours a day, as he puts it. I doubt he works 12 hours a day, and I doubt his wife does. But he has to send his kids, and then he complains about how in the Ware public school system they asked all the kids if their parents had guns and what kind of guns they had is what the teachers are asking their parents. And he's like, I'm calling my lawyer. I'm like, dude, lawyers are useless. Why are your kids in school?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, what am I supposed to do with them? I'm like, it's so you just government subsidized day prison. I says, you're asking men with guns to threaten me to pay taxes so you could have 4-wheelers and brand new trucks.
Yeah, that's
in
so
all
true.
fairness. They're going to pay, an additional kid or 2 in the public school system actually doesn't cost much of anything because, another in a math class doesn't really do anything. But, I think that he's fallen into the trap. What's that?
He's still supporting it.
Well, look, I mean, it's easy to be sanctimonious. I've never sent my kid to government school either. What I'm trying to say is there's a trap, right? And the trap is, hey, we're going to offer, middle-class welfare, babysitting day prison to you. And, that's all you have to do is give your young minds full of mush to us and we will mold them and shape them. And in exchange, you get the bass boat, the jet skis, the big house, and, all those other things. And it's a series of decisions that you make. As well as I do that when we were, when Jack was younger, we homeschooled him and made a few sacrifices for that, and we're happy that we did.
Yeah, you drove an old piece of crap pickup truck so you could not have to go work a whole bunch of hours so you could homeschool your kid.
Right, so that I have to pay for the pickup truck so I can drive my kid to the school. So I have to spend more gas.
So the thing about United States versus Argentina is just like the incentives and the stuff that we think about as like who's a parasite and who's not is all messed up. Like basically the people who do anything productive are not even paid very well at all. The unionized people are like lawyers and crap like that who instead of like, building things, they're just making an ability for them to have some sort of stupid cushy job where they're also getting government money and it's being funded by all these poor people. In Argentina, it's like really, really rich people, dirt poor people, and that's like it.
And it wasn't like that in Argentina, a few centuries, a few decades ago, and that's the way it's really going right now in this country. And what they're talking about with all these protests is this is the parasite flailing. Like when you do a parasite cleanse in your body, like a Candida cleanse, one of the side effects of parasite die-off is the hormones that Candida puts into your blood to like make you crave sugar because that's what Candida wants.
Whoa.
It all gets dumped into your blood, sort of like that hormone gets pumped into your blood when those parasites die off, and like you get wicked cranky and like sort of out of control. I know what happened to me. I did like a hardcore, I used to be 300 pounds like 10 years ago. Mark remembers when I was fat. And yeah, I did this intense Candida cleanse, and for like a whole week I was an a-hole, and people are like, what is wrong with you, man?
Dang. And it's like also like a flailing dying beast or whatever.
Yeah. Can you imagine all the protests that would be here in New Hampshire if like all of a sudden there was all right, we're not collecting any more taxes anymore from any of the private people. We're only collecting taxes from the government contractors and government employees. Like it's supposed to be no private citizens are paying taxes. There's no more property tax. There's no more any of this tax, and everybody would just stop operating governments basically licensed businesses and just operate their own private entrepreneurship. Just do it themselves.
Like, oh, we don't have enough money for this type of welfare anymore. Sorry, you guys got to figure that out.
Yeah, they're going to go crazy. There'd be massive protests. They would probably stage, all kinds of crimes. Well, it wouldn't go too far in New Hampshire because we have a very heavily armed population. So you couldn't get like, you couldn't get like the things happening in Oregon and California for like protests and riots that happen here because landowners just aren't going to tolerate it, and they don't have to.
But that is what's happening in Argentina.
They're actually like burning buildings and like.
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
Just that they're having protests. I haven't heard anything about them being like really violent or anything like that. And the thing is, like, I can't really explain to you what Malay's shock slashing of the economy includes because they're just not reporting on it in English. And I know that they're doing that on purpose, but I'm working on that. I have some friends that speak Spanish that are possibly going to call in and help us understand everything about that. But this is what this Reason.com article says about Malay and the protesters facing off. At least 200,000 unionized workers of the country's 5 million or so will be marching in the streets of Buenos Aires today against newly elected Libertarian President Javier Malay's policies. Inflation now exceeds 200%, and about 40% of the country is living below the poverty line. I don't like how they wrote that. It's like it was getting really, really bad before he got elected, and it's not like he made the inflation happen, you know? Malay is...
What he did was to basically accept reality. Now, when I was in Buenos Aires in February of last year, 2023...
You're there.
We're still connected? Okay.
Yep.
When I was in there were two exchange rates. There was the exchange rate you could get from the government or any of the airport kind of exchanges, and there was the ones you could get sort of on the street. Now, I'm not saying this is some guy with "Psst, come here." It's storefronts just on the street, and you'd go in there. They're like little banks, and you exchange your U.S. dollars for Argentinian pesos. And basically, it made more sense to go to the streets because you got twice as much money for your dollar. And yeah, I mean, once you started doing that, the steak dinners were $8 a piece. Argentina is widely known for its steak, the entraña.
Yeah, I want to go there. Did you go to like steak restaurants to get really good steak?
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful. It's basically like Italy, inexpensive Italy.
Yeah, I heard that it's like nothing like Mexican food, and it's more like Italian food with a bunch of steak. And that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's Italian food with a bunch of steak is exactly right.
They have way more cows than people there.
Is that so? I didn't get out into the hinterland, but we did see some cows, and so it's all part of the culture there. And so I mean, all Milei did under these circumstances was tell the truth, and of course the International Press Corps hates this stuff. I mean, the LA Times journalists are getting laid off, and they're like, "Oh, poor us! You people have been against us for so long. I don't care anymore."
And one part about the accepting reality thing that he's doing is basically just like he's letting the peso kind of die and not just like propping it up. And I don't really know how that really works, like to explain it to the listeners, but that's what he's doing. And because of that, inflation is just going to get worse before things get better. And it's like why they're calling it a shock. I forget how they explain it, but they're calling it a shock to the system, or something like that in this article. It says Malay is working to implement massive reforms, which include slashing the number of government employees, deregulating many sectors of the economy, and targeting deeply entrenched unions. And one thing that's really cool about Malay that I learned yesterday as well is that he became an ANCAP. He was interested in economics. He was kind of a right-winger. And he did not like the Peronists, which are Peronists, whatever. They're the lefties. They're the socialists there. Well, his friend gave him the book in Spanish, The Market for Liberty. And that completely changed him into an ANCAP. And that's like a really good book. I read it. Ian did an audiobook version of it, which you can find on YouTube.
Book.freetalklive.com.
Okay, yeah, it's freetalklive.com. More coming up, 603-283-6160. More coming up, don't go anywhere.
The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com.
There are basically two types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Former US President Donald Trump says he made defamatory remarks whilst in the White House to, quote, defend himself, his family and the presidency. Testifying in a New York courtroom, Mr. Trump insisted he didn't intend to cause harm to E. Jean Carroll. He'd accused the writer of making up a sexual abuse claim against him for financial and political reasons. But he says he stands by his denial of her allegations. Our US correspondent Benji Heyer reports.
Donald Trump took to the stand for just a matter of minutes in a trial to decide how much he should pay E. Jean Carroll for defaming her, something a separate jury found him liable of last year. His comments were brief. He wasn't allowed to offer any testimony explicitly saying or even implying that he didn't sexually assault Miss Carroll. While this is a civil case, Mr. Trump also faces 4 criminal trials as he vies for the Oval Office again. Yet rather than hampering his bid for the presidency, his legal woes seem to be driving his campaign forward, branding himself as someone not just being prosecuted, but politically persecuted. The jurors in this trial return on Friday to hear closing arguments.
Meanwhile, one of former President Trump's aides, Peter Navarro, has been sentenced to 4 months in jail. Mr. Trump's longtime trade advisor had been found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for not appearing at a hearing of the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. Caroline Malone reports.
Peter Navarro had ignored House representatives who'd compelled him to testify before the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack, and he was found guilty on 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress. His lawyers argued that President Trump had directed him not to comply with subpoenas. He should be protected due to executive privilege. But the judge in the case rejected that, saying the words executive privilege are not magical incantations. Navarro has asked that his sentence be put on hold while he appeals.
In France, large swathes of a controversial new immigration law have been struck down by the country's Constitutional Council. Many of the measures had been added by the country's far right, which is gaining popularity among voters. Tony Waterman has more from Paris.
35 measures were either struck down or partially rejected, which is about 40% of the bill. This includes the tightening of access to social welfare benefits, the establishment of migrant quotas, and restrictions on family reunification. The far right has called the ruling a coup, with the support of President Emmanuel Macron. But experts say this is no gift for him either. He lost a lot of support defending the measures, seen as a way to woo conservative voters ahead of June elections. The ruling cannot be appealed, and many on the left are calling for it to be scrapped altogether.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the future for Taiwan diplomatically on the world stage after the elections that took place there earlier this month. Taiwanese voters rewarded the country's Democratic Progressive Party with an historic third win, precisely the result Beijing did not want to see. But China had a victory of its own up its sleeve by persuading the tiny Pacific island of Nauru to sever diplomatic relations with Taipei and restore them with mainland China instead. Bob McMahon is with America's Council on Foreign Relations.
This is part of an ongoing effort by China to pick off all of the countries that recognize Taiwan, and in so doing, once and for all, completely isolate Taiwan and continue what it hopes is a inevitable, inexorable path towards unification with the mainland. China's response has been somewhat guarded since the results, but it was quick to lash out at countries that were supportive of Taiwan, including the U.S., which in its response stressed it did not recognize Taiwanese independence, but nonetheless congratulated Mr. Lai on his victory. But also you had countries like Japan and the Philippines with pretty strong, robust notes of congratulations to the DPP candidate for winning, which brought an immediate rebuke from Beijing.
Nauru's government claimed it reached its decision independently, with no pressure applied by Beijing. Taiwan said it was deeply grieved by the decision. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our main news again. Former US President Donald Trump told a courtroom in New York he made defamatory remarks while in the White House to, quote, defend himself, his family and the presidency. One of the former president's aides, Peter Navarro, has been sentenced to 4 months in jail for contempt of Congress. And large swathes of a controversial new immigration law in France have been struck down by the country's Constitutional Council. And that's the latest feature story news. Kate Fisher reporting.
Following the conclusion of yet another day marked by a litany of tedious and unavoidable realities, The Onion spoke with sociologist Dr. Timothy Coghill, who told reporters that the nation would be forced to go through all of it again tomorrow.
As our projections demonstrate, tomorrow, like today, every man, woman, and child in America will wake up and do it all again. All of it, including traffic, the workday, bad coffee, your kid's soccer game, laundry, the struggling economy.
Statistical evidence also showed that the nation would once again endure traumatic childhood memories, Twitter, anxiety, poverty, consumerism, rampant abuses of the legal system,
joint pain, racial inequality, global warming, the steady erosion of civil liberties, violence, loneliness, disease, unresolved intimacy issues, the ravages of age, hunger, sexual frustration, existential dread, the looming specter of death.
For more on this unending story, check this week's Onion Review.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. 603-283-6160 is the number. 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight on Free Talk Live, it's me, Bonnie.
Jay.
And me, Mark Edge.
And it looks like we already have a caller, so I'm going to go to Gigi in North Carolina. Gigi, what's on your mind?
I'm in South Carolina.
Oh, really? Sorry. South Carolina.
That's okay. You guys have to fix that, because every time I call, the captain says it also.
Yeah, I think he saved your name as that, because that's what I see popping up here, so I just said, yeah, I'll try to fix it. I can do that, actually.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good evening, everyone. To all my fellow listeners out there in Radioland across the United States of America, I would like to express a personal opinion regarding the death penalty. Personally, I have a big problem with the death penalty, whether it is administered by the federal government or an individual state government. And I find that the issue of the death penalty currently in Alabama definitely qualifies as cruel and unusual punishment as it relates to, or as it pertains to, how people interpret legally the death penalty. The individual that is scheduled to be gassed to death in Alabama currently, several years ago.
Oh yeah, I was trying to remember what was worse about Alabama than anywhere else, but yeah, they gassed people.
Well, you know what? Any form of the death penalty, I have a problem with. You know,
Agreed.
which is worse, being an alcoholic or addicted to heroin? Addiction is addiction. Death, by any means, is death. And yet, this individual who is scheduled to be gassed in Alabama, several years ago, he was placed in the death chamber. They attempted to insert several needles into his veins for the so-called toxic cocktails, plural, so that he would be put to death. They botched it. They could not locate a vein anywhere. So now they are going to gas him to death.
Whoa.
Now, my interpretation of that is this is cruel and unusual because they're doing it again, and it's just gruesome and gory to me. Other people are free to have a different opinion from myself. I just have a big problem with this.
Well, thank you for voicing your opinion, Gigi. I definitely agree. I don't think that the death penalty should exist. What do you guys think?
Well, I just made a Twitter post of this. I think it was yesterday. I ran across one of those little sort of, today in history kind of things. And a kid, 14 years old, George Stinney Jr., was falsely convicted in court, and I don't have it right here where it was, but accused of killing two white girls, Betty, 11 years old, and Mary, 7, and the bodies were found near his house. And then they found out years later, basically that he didn't commit the crime and he couldn't have committed the crime, and
But he was already
any variety of things. But oh yeah, he was dead within weeks because that's how it was done back in the day. But he was 14 years old. Now that doesn't make a difference. Really, the point that I make as far as the death penalty goes is that people who support the death penalty are the killers that they propose to kill. Let me defend that statement. So everybody who supports the death penalty will admit that at some point, somehow, there are mistakes made, especially in the past. But they're like, oh, well, we got video and, all kinds of things. Well, let's leave all that behind. I mean, people can fake video. Absolutely. There's, there's no, if there's DNA on the site, there could be any variety of reasons. We don't know what happened because we're not perfect. And since we're not perfect, we should not take action like putting somebody to death that is so final, especially when there's all kinds of people in prison for life. Life in prison is not getting away with it, and stop acting like it is. So putting somebody to death, that if you support the death penalty, you're proposing the last 100 people that were convicted of that were sentenced to the death penalty are guilty, and you support it. Therefore, of those 100 people, surely one of them is not guilty, and you're proposing that you're supporting that person being put to death. That makes you the killer of an innocent person that you propose to kill, and that's the reason I don't support the death penalty. It's too final. We're humans. We make mistakes. Also, the death penalty costs tremendous amounts of money regarding court cases and these sorts of things, trying and retrying and appeals and all these sorts of things. It costs more money to house these people. It's just a heck of a lot cheaper to put them in prison for life and be done with it.
And I agree. Watching The Green Mile definitely made me think, okay, I'm against death penalty now.
George Stinney is actually the one that The Green Mile was based on.
Oh, really? Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
I agree.
But he was a kid.
agree with you also, Mark, and to add to what Mark had to say is, these prosecutors have no conscience and they just don't care.
Yeah.
We have overzealous prosecutors that there's clear evidence. It's a very clear pattern that with anything from like they set up people on sex crimes with children. They Kamala Harris, for example, she's a famous example of this. She withheld exculpatory evidence that she knew that people were innocent of crimes. I don't know if it was anybody who was going to be sentenced to death, but she knew people were innocent
Mostly
of
drug
crimes.
criminals.
And then also, I'm curious of, so I know with like every time that Child Protective Services steals a child, every time that all kinds of things that Child Protective Services does in a conspiracy with the corrupt family courts around the world, around the country, when they do, there's all kinds of list of things that they can do, and the Judicial Pension Fund gets money. Also, other pension funds of state employees get money. Programs for state employees to make their lives more cushy get money from the federal government. So I'm wondering, is there any incentives for, if there's a death row inmate on death row, is there an incentive fund from the federal government through maybe the Social Security? It's Title IV, Social Security Administration, Title 4D specifically, that gives money to the judicial pension funds of state judicial officers such as judges and prosecutors, and whoever works for the judiciary. Is there money that the federal government gives, for example, to states for housing death row inmates? Is there money they get for killing death row inmates? Is there money they get because the death row inmate files every single possible appeal?
Yep.
And plus, we know how corrupt these prosecutors are.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even want to ride in an elevator with these people when I'm at the State House, because when these guys meet their maker, they're going to burn in hell if there's any justice in the world. These people are so diabolically evil.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned justice, and I think it's worth looking at is that people who support the death penalty, like I used to, tend to be very interested in justice. They want to see justice served. And I do too. But here's the question I would ask is, if somebody is falsely convicted and gets the death penalty, and then we can see through the court system, they manage, one of these people that manages to show that they were in fact innocent, and these stories exist, and imagine how many more people are never proven, because all you have to do is know that the court system's corrupt to know that's the case. But here's my question. If that's the case, then should the judge, the prosecutor, the jury that all voted for this, should they all be put on death row for threatening the life of a man who was innocent? Because that's what somebody who actually cared about murder would want to see happen.
Right. Yeah. Whatever a prosecutor is willing to charge someone with, that prosecutor actually should, if that guy's found innocent, or like with the exculpatory evidence thing, what would be just is if the prosecutor got triple whatever the damages they were, trying to gather out of, whoever they were trying to prosecute.
That would be the proper incentives. That would mean that somebody who's prosecuting would not withhold evidence, because withholding evidence in a case, to me should result in triple the time that you asked for from the judge.
So we also have Dave Ridley in New Hampshire on the line. Dave Ridley of RidleyReport.com. What's on your mind?
Already talked about, I heard that Jason Gerhardt was arrested again for trying to film at the federal court. Is that true, or am I just hearing about the first arrest?
That did happen. I don't think we talked about it on Free Talk Live because I don't know much about it. We could probably get Chris to call in or something because he was there. I wanted to go, but I just could not wake up. I had to wake up at like 6-something a.m. if I was going to go. I couldn't do it. But he did get arrested again. They were filming in the lobby, and they tried to go through the security with their cameras, and they got arrested again. They got charged with different things. I don't know why, but with Frank, it was like obstruction of justice. I'm not sure exactly. Frank got 2 other ones, and then Jason got only 1, and it was like disobeying an officer. I'm pretty sure. I mean, like, see, I don't know all the details. That's why I haven't really brought it up. But yeah, they were going to their court date for getting ticketed for filming in the federal courthouse in Concord, New Hampshire, and they decided to film while going in again, and they got arrested again.
Yeah, I really appreciate them taking this stand. You know,
Me too.
I've always been so furious at the feds for the fact that they won't allow filming on these public properties like their courthouses. And that's why so much, crap goes on in the federal courtrooms, because they know they're not being filmed.
Yep, that's the worst part about that.
It's the strangest thing to me that somehow people allow this the court thing to continue where there's no cameras allowed. I mean, like, what are they hiding in there?
Exactly.
It's really bizarre.
Why do most people not see it that way?
Every other court in America allows cameras, but somehow these federal cases are just too important.
And they always try to tell people, oh, well, it is, for the people on the stand and even the defendant's safety. It's for your safety.
They're so full of S.
Yeah, that's such a lie.
Well, what about all the states that allow people in criminal trials? They allow cameras in there.
Yeah, and like murder cases and everything.
They don't show the jury. They don't show they can show the defendant, whatever the situation is. This is not an insurmountable problem. It's not even remotely close to an insurmountable problem. And the only justification that I've ever heard is it's tradition. And since it's the federal government, our traditions are more important. And if you don't like them, we'll smash you over the head and throw you in jail.
Well, we know that the federal government protects pedophiles. They protect Epstein for a very long time. There's a woman who got 20 years in prison named Ghislaine Maxwell. She probably got out on appeal already. We don't even know about it. They won't be like, oh, Ghislaine got out of jail when, she gets out of jail. But, my wife has spent more time in court than anyone on Epstein's or Ghislaine Maxwell's client list. And these guys all know who the clients are, but, they're just a protected class. So the reason that they do not want cameras in the courtrooms at the federal level is because they are very, very occupied and busy with protecting all their pedophile friends. And that's really the bottom line as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I also think they just don't want people to see how things happen, because they can then control the narrative. They can say, oh, this happened in court, and the transcript probably isn't going to get published, because like Ian, he paid for the transcript and it was expensive and put it out himself. It's not like the government puts it out publicly, and
in Ian's trial, the prosecutor said something breathtakingly racist.
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry, the transcript just doesn't do it any justice. You have to kind of have the video for it to really go viral. And if black people in America heard this guy say what he said, which was essentially, does this look like a CEO to you?
It's suggesting just a picture of a black guy. Yeah.
Right. So suggesting that black skin makes it impossible for you to be a CEO, or even unlikely, then, that would have gone viral. But because it wasn't, thank goodness. And this guy has now been made a federal judge.
Yep. The same prosecutor that said that. Well, thank you, Dave, for the call. I definitely really appreciate Jason Gerhardt and Footloose Frank's activism on that. It looks like we have another caller.
One thing real quick with Gerhardt there. We talked about this a little bit last week. I will actually send you this now, Bonnie, so this can be put in the show notes. But if anybody wants to support Jason Gerhardt and Footloose, there is a notice that you can look up on JotForm. We can add the footnote, I guess, to either social media or something.
Put it on social media.
But there is a notice that has been done by the David Jose Cares for You folks. David Jose on X. You guys should check him out. He's doing some fabulous work. And it is a notice that you should read. And this is a notice for the judge in Jason Gerhardt and Footloose's case. And we'll get it up in the show notes.
And you just want people to read it, or is it something people sign?
So you can read it. You can electronically sign it. You put in your email. It sends it back to you. If you really want to make it, firm to this judge and this prosecutor and in this federal court building, so through the jot form, it gets emailed to the judge.
Wow.
But you can take it and send it, print it out, and send it certified mail to the judge and the prosecutor. That would be really the ultimate thing to do. And then the other thing you can do
I didn't know that.
is check out what these guys are doing. This David Jose group, they're very active on Twitter. He does a Twitter space like I can't even follow all Twitter spaces he does, but they're super informative. He does these Twitter spaces, multiple times a week, talking about how the power of affidavits, the power of notices, informing your government servants. Remember, these guys are servants, and the minute that they are not servants, they're either acting as a servant or they're committing treason. And there's no in between with these government actors, and they have to be put on notice. And the notice sets these guys up to tell them what they're doing wrong, explaining to them how to remedy the issue. You just read this notice, and it's a really cool jot form. You can do it right from your tablet, your smartphone, your computer, anywhere in the world, and you can let the judge know that Jason has a right to a trial by a judgment of his peers, not one of these statutory jury trial things. Which a jury trial is not a trial by jury; they're two totally different things. I'm not going to get into that right now, but definitely check out this jot form.
And apparently now, because they got arrested again, the judge is saying that for some reason that means he doesn't have a right to a jury trial now.
Yeah, they reduced it to basically not a crime. It's a civil infraction, not a criminal charge kind of thing is what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, me either. It looks like we do have another caller on the line, though. Unscreened caller, what's on your mind?
Hey, Jay, how's debunking libertarian lies?
We have a rule. You can only call once a day, and he was already creepy, so I hung up on him, so it's just a loser.
It's a bot.
I'm not sure how the rule works when you hang up on them the first time, but whatever.
Well, if you call in and make a creepy voice, I'm going to hang up on you. You're obviously
I got it. The first voice was creepy. I agree.
Well, I want to go back to talking about Javier Milei in Argentina. We're talking about his shock therapy, is what they're calling it, to try to fix the economy down there, which has been messed up for over 100 years. Back in the 1860s, they had a president that was like, you know what, let's be more like America and let's be more free markets and stuff like that. And they were actually doing so well that there was a term, and that term was rich like an Argentine. It was just synonymous with being rich. They were doing so well. But then in the early 1900s, they continued to do well. And in the early 1900s, there was this guy that Mark pointed out became president, and his prostitute wife and him were socialists, and they just made the world worse and worse. And I mean, not the world, well, yeah, that too, but they made Argentina, the country, worse and worse. And now they have hyperinflation, like the type of inflation where prices on the shelves are changing by the hour type of things. And people who were living week to week or like paycheck to paycheck are now not surviving. It's getting so bad. And here's what Milei is working to implement. He's working to implement massive reforms, which include slashing the number of government employees. Excellent. Deregulating many sectors of the economy. Excellent. And targeting deeply entrenched unions. And that's why the unions are protesting. It says lawyers are furious about plans to fast-track divorces through the civil registry without requiring their services. Oh, well, nice. So people won't have to pay a lawyer to get divorced. I mean, it should just be as simple as you notify the government you're divorced. Well,
first off, government should have no involvement in marriage whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. There should be no government marriage incentives, punishments, contracts, marriage certificates. It's just, where do marriage licenses originate from in the United States? It was because the church would not marry people of different races. So the state, so basically it started off, well, first off, it was so black and white people, interracial marriages couldn't happen.
Couldn't get married,
and
right.
then it turned into the state the churches wouldn't marry you, so the state would do it because, they found a way to make an enslavement mechanism out of it. And, that's basically the bottom line with, marriage licenses. If you get a marriage license, you're basically polyamorous.
Yeah.
And the state is involved in your marriage as far as I'm concerned.
Right. It's an agreement that at this point, in my opinion, has become weighted to one side, and I don't support them generally. I mean, it's become very difficult for dads to get justice out of the family court.
And I just think if there's going to be state marriage, which I don't think there should be at all, I like what he's doing here, and lawyers being furious about it. I mean, like, what kind of a parasite do you have to be furious that the government is no longer requiring your service for something that it's just not necessary for you to be there for? Like, hey, we need a job.
But what if you lost your cushy job and your income and your pension that you were just gonna, just lay around and do nothing for your retirement? Now you have to work.
Then I'd be a pathetic dying parasite, and I would deserve to die. 603-283-6160. More coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Former US President Donald Trump says he made defamatory remarks whilst in the White House to, quote, defend himself, his family, and the presidency. Testifying in a New York courtroom, Mr. Trump insisted he didn't intend to cause harm to E. Jean Carroll. He'd accused the writer of making up a sexual abuse claim against him for financial and political reasons. But he says he stands by his denial of her allegations. Our US correspondent Benji Heyer reports.
Donald Trump took to the stand for just a matter of minutes in a trial to decide how much he should pay E. Jean Carroll for defaming her, something a separate jury found him liable of last year. His comments were brief. He wasn't allowed to offer any testimony explicitly saying or even implying that he didn't sexually assault Miss Carroll. While this is a civil case, Mr. Trump also faces 4 criminal trials as he vies for the Oval Office again. Yet rather than hampering his bid for the presidency, his legal woes seem to be driving his campaign forward, branding himself as someone not just being prosecuted, but politically persecuted. The jurors in this trial return on Friday to hear closing arguments.
Meanwhile, one of former President Trump's aides, Peter Navarro, has been sentenced to 4 months in jail. Mr. Trump's longtime trade advisor had been found guilty of 2 counts of contempt of Congress for not appearing at a hearing of the House committee investigating the January the 6th insurrection. Caroline Malone reports.
Peter Navarro had ignored House representatives who'd compelled him to testify before the committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack, and he was found guilty on 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress. His lawyers argued that President Trump had directed him not to comply with subpoenas. He should be protected due to executive privilege. But the judge in the case rejected that, saying the words executive privilege are not magical incantations. Navarro has asked that his sentence be put on hold while he appeals.
In France, large swathes of a controversial new immigration law have been struck down by the country's Constitutional Council. Many of the measures had been added by the country's far right, which is gaining popularity among voters. Tony Waterman has more from Paris.
35 measures were either struck down or partially rejected, which is about 40% of the bill. This includes the tightening of access to social welfare benefits, the establishment of migrant quotas, and restrictions on family reunification. The far right has called the ruling a coup, with the support of President Emmanuel Macron. But experts say this is no gift for him either. He lost a lot of support defending the measures, seen as a way to woo conservative voters ahead of June elections. The ruling cannot be appealed, and many on the left are calling for it to be scrapped altogether.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. And I'd like to thank Evan Daniels, who's a silver level amplifier with us. Evan Daniels is giving to the AMPS program, and that makes him an amplifier, which you can go to at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com if you'd like to help keep Free Talk Live up and running and on the air. Thank you so much to Evan. We really appreciate it here at Free Talk Live. And in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie,
Jay,
and Mark Edge.
And in the last segment, we were talking about Javier Milei in Argentina. And normally I don't care. I don't even know any other president of any other country. I mean, I know that there's the King of England. I don't even know his name, actually. I can't remember if it's King Edward? Charles? Okay. Well, I don't care about other politicians in other countries. I barely even care about the ones here.
If anybody wants to, the most lazy way to understand about Javier Milei is to go on YouTube and search Javier Milei, or maybe if you don't know how to spell that, because I wouldn't be able to spell it right, but just President of Argentina addresses World Economic Forum, WEF.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're going to find an English translation, and it was an awesome speech.
It was really awesome, and we did cover that on the show.
It's really good.
The other week, because the World Economic Forum is a group of socialist freaks that claim to have some kind of influence over your life and wherever you live on the globe. And they meet at Davos, I think it's Switzerland, and they meet and discuss how they're going to control your life. And Javier Milei went there as the new president of Argentina and gave a speech, and he talked about how free markets are the answer to prosperity. And oh my God, it was just altogether 100% based and awesome. So yeah, if you want to learn about him, go look that up. But we're talking about what he's doing now, and apparently he's trying to blast away at the parasite class, which is actually what he calls them. He calls them the parasite class. He also calls them a caste, which is kind of like an appropriate word for it. These people live extremely lavish lives on the backs of all the workers, and all the workers are dirt poor. And they consider themselves a higher caste and steal money, and it's all super corrupt. And even beyond the corruption, it's like they have created this system. Like, even if they're going by the system, they've created this system, which is just socialism basically now in Argentina. They're ruining lives, but the people voted for Javier Milei because they're tired of that. They just want something new. And Javier is just like, he's getting rid of the old system, and he's fast tracking it, and there might be a little shock to the system there for a while, but I think overall things are going to get better and better, and that's why I care about this, because I think it can be really amazing, just extremely good to see and extremely good for the people that live there, and it's going to be proof of the ideas we talk about here on Free Talk Live actually coming to fruition. He's deregulating sectors of the economy, firing government employees. He says afuera. That's like his catchphrase. He says, like, you're out. It's like Trump saying fired, except he actually means it. He's awesome. I'm a big Javier Milei fan all of a sudden. It says that lawyers are furious about plans to fast-track divorces through the civil registry without requiring their services. So they're,
Yeah, he's basically tearing down the bar association monopoly. I don't know if Argentina is the bar association like they are here in the United States, and the bar association comes out of England or UK or something. But he's working on tearing down their monopoly, and that's awesome because lawyers are scumbags.
It says that arty types, like artists, I guess, are protesting about gutted funds and closure of the National Theater Institute. So they're mad that they aren't getting paid to just make art from the government, from the backs of the poor people. That's so ridiculous.
Well, many countries, Argentina considers itself sort of European, and Europe tends to do this funding of the arts thing far more than other places do. I can understand people are angry, but what I would say to Argentinians is, whatever you were doing for the last century hasn't been working, and you're gonna have to try something new. And because your parents, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents acted completely irresponsibly with their money and with their government, now somebody like Javier Milei has to step in. It didn't have to be this way, but you had to be the way you were, so now this has to be the way it is. I get it. Like it's nice to have the arts. It would be great if corporations funded it. Maybe rich people can, whatever the situation is. I don't care much, but the reality is that Argentina was broke. Mm-hmm. It was broke. And there's no amount of news stories that can change that. There's not one of these crybaby reporters. There's not one of these union workers out there protesting that could have done a better job. Javier Milei is willing to take the risks that no other politician has ever been willing to do. And that is to say, hey, you in the parasite class, you've had enough. All you remoras are getting off this shark. It's about to die. If you want to save this thing, you can join with me. And if you're not, you can just sit out there and cry.
Well, arty types aren't the only ones that are all mad about what Javier Milei is doing, and it's so stupid that they would be, but they're out there protesting because they want money to make art. It's so ridiculous. Fishermen are cross about permit deregulation, and sugar producers are railing against plans to remove import tariffs. So there are sugar producers that are mad because it might become cheaper to just import the sugar from somewhere else. I can't imagine hating the other people in my country around me so much. Like, that you want them to have to pay more just so you have a specific job. It's like, I hate people that want to, preserve the job that they have right now so bad that they can't just pivot, It's like, no one is telling you to go be poor and have no job and die. No one is telling you that. People are saying that you are doing this too expensive. We want to move on and progress with our lives.
I'm totally okay with the sugar producers going out of business. The entire global sugar industry is so hardcore subsidized by the government. The reason, probably the number two reason, the number two health issue in America is due to sugar. I used to think it was number one. Now I think the number one health issue in America is due to seed oils, which is also every seed oil is heavily, heavily government subsidized. I could tell you right now, if sugar was not subsidized, it would be probably just as competitive to go buy $45, $50 a gallon maple syrup as to buy, cane sugar if they didn't have the subsidies for sugar. Because I can tell you that maple syrup is not really subsidized. It's subsidized a little bit. Some of these maple syrup guys get government grants to buy these really cool, evaporators. But it's still a lot of hard work. And the same thing with all the seed oils. If we should be using pork lard and tallow, as an oil, as a fat in, our foods and stuff, and not motor oil. And that's what, cottonseed and, canola oil was originally used for. Motor oil, axle lubricant.
Yep, that is literally true. But they have these byproducts, and they're like, oh, what should we use this for? Oh, we could put it in food and make even more money. These chemical producers, which are also like a lot of times parasites.
And
That's in America.
just the subsidized sugar and the subsidized seed oils just basically is going to make people, pharmaceutical customers, for the last half of their lifetime, the last 2/3 of their lifetime.
It says, but no one is more affected by Mr. Milei's shock therapy than Argentina's trade unions, or more enraged by it. His labor reforms would kneecap them by requiring employees to opt into union membership, rather than having dues taken out automatically, as they are at present. This would leave the unions out of pocket. That's awesome. You should have the choice to join a union or not. A lot of times they suck. So I think it's just great what he's doing. It's the unions who are leading today's strikes and hoping to hobble Milei's future plans, which they really failed, by the way. Like, 1/10 of them came than were expected. But the new government does not intend to roll over and take it. Milei's administration said it will allow protests, but threatened to cut off public aid payments to anyone who blocks thoroughfares, which I think is a pretty freaking good way to do it. I'm not in favor of protesting and blocking roads. I think that it's just a bad idea. But if the government is going to do something about it, I don't want the government throwing people in cages. I don't want the government running people over with cars or something. But cutting off their welfare, that's a great way to do it.
I agree. And, just if you cut off the welfare right now in New Hampshire, there's a lot of crackheads and heroin addicts that are on SSI also, which is like a federal thing, Social Security Disability Insurance, whatever it's called. But if the welfare state stopped, in America, all these drug addicts would have to actually start robbing people again to get money, to get their money to do drugs, which in New Hampshire would result in a whole bunch of dead drug addicts. But California and New York would be a little different story. You just would have a lot of people getting mugged. But these people are allowed to become just career drug addicts quite simply because the state just gives them money.
It seems like he's also being a little bit of a tyrant in this next section. It says that marchers were also forbidden to carry sticks, cover their faces, or bring children to the protests. Not really in favor of that. It says people can demonstrate...
Which part? All of it?
Carry sticks, cover their faces, or bring children. Yeah, they should be allowed to do those things.
Well, what if 3 days before marchers carried sticks and bashed the headlights out of cars?
Those people should be held accountable for their own actions.
Yeah, I think it should be okay to just run people over that are blocking the road. Just do it. There was actually a guy down in Arizona or New Mexico. He's got a Dodge Dually pickup truck with a big, nice living quarter horse trailer behind
not
it.
Jump in front of him to make a protest.
And they were blocking the road, and they started smashing his truck and like with sticks and bats, and he just. He was stopped when they started smashing his windows and stuff, and he just got on it and went, and you could see the truck like just rolling over bodies. Like, I guess a couple people died, they got run over and stuff. And what was really scary about this is there was some lady had a baby carriage was in the middle of like this stuff.
Whoa.
And I scrolled through the through the comments, and I found out that he was never charged or anything. It was found that he was reasonable for him to just leave because he had his wife and like 2 kids with him.
I would totally, if I was like on a jury or something for that, I would say it was reasonable because I would be fearing for my life if somebody's trying to break my windows while I'm in the car.
I have very little to the point that I sound awful when talking about people who are protesting in the middle of the road. Like, I just have no sympathy for them. If I was on a jury and you're in the middle of the road and he ran you over, backed up, ran you over again, and then ran you over again, you're going to have a heck of a time get me to find him guilty of anything. You don't belong in the road. Look, people have to cross the street. That's one thing. People who sit in the middle of the street to protest whatever they're protesting, I just have no sympathy for what happens to them.
Well, it looks like we do have some callers online, so I'm going to go to Tim from Florida. Tim, what's on your mind?
Hey, Actually, I was thinking about the possibility if Netanyahu, or as I like to call him, Netanyahu, if he's listening right now, if he were to line up a bunch of
He's a big
Palestinians
fan of Free Talk Live.
What's that?
He's a big fan of Free Talk Live.
Are you serious?
I bet he is, and I bet some Israeli operatives are too. I was almost ran over by a couple of them today. But anyway, so if Netanyahu is to line up a bunch of Palestinian children and stab them in the neck on live television or on YouTube, I think that people like Glenn Beck, Steve Deese, Pat Gray, and Ben Shapiro would say, that's Israel defending itself.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Oh, he hung up. Oh, yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's pretty hilarious. And basically it's happening. I mean, I had this story in Show Prep about a Palestinian American girl. Wait, I might be wrong. That's Palestinian American, but a Palestinian girl who got killed, and witnesses are saying that like it was completely unprovoked. And I just think people are getting killed senselessly over there, and people are like, it's Israel defending itself. They don't know what the word defense means. Defense is, oh, I'm in immediate threat, and I need to stop that threat. Nothing else. Not killing innocent people. We also have David in New Mexico on the line. David, what's on your mind?
Lots of stuff, Bonnie. It's crazy. And I wanted to comment on what actually Jay, some things he said at the beginning of the program. However, he just went right back into that same material just a moment ago. And Jay was talking about the welfare system. And one of the things that, well, first of all, let me throw out the word. What is it? Enabling. The welfare system enables certain behavior. And one of the behaviors that Jay listed was on the, and it doesn't have to be single mothers, but I think he used an example of a single mother that receives welfare and then is belligerent and to the people who are essentially being taxed to pay her benefits because she's entitled, hence entitlement. And so she becomes not a very nice person. And the government, the welfare system is enabling that, because if that didn't exist, she would have to be pleasant in order to have people want to help her. Let me transfer that same concept to another aspect of government. And Jay was also talking about the CPS, the Child Protective. I'll just use the term CPS. Every state has a different variation of it. Mm-hmm. But Child Protective Services is another way that the state enables certain behavior. But let me go take a step to the left or to the right, whatever, and talk about when Child Protective Services is not involved. In other words, it's a matter between two private citizens, typically a husband and a wife getting divorced, which happens all the time, right? And so, like, if you have a husband and wife on, right next door to you, across the street, on your block, in your neighborhood, whatever, and they're friends of yours and you've known them, and they're splitting up, okay, well, you're splitting up, and they got children. And if the same thing applies, the enabling on because of the state. If the state didn't exist or existed but didn't get itself involved, then each party wouldn't be as enabled to be as abusive to the other party by playing games with the children, withholding children, withholding assistance, whatever, because the state is not there with a big stick to force somebody to do one thing or another. You'd need to seek some cooperation. Also, another thing that would happen is because the state is involved, the neighbors don't really get involved. First of all, because they have no power. But second
that is such a good point. Because people are always like, well, what would you do in that situation if you knew a kid was being abused? Well, the state being involved keeps anyone from wanting to get involved because, like, they could get prosecuted. And I'm not saying that, right, like, you should go around just, like, being a vigilante, killing people just because you don't like the way that they raise their kids and stuff. But, like, going over and being like, what are you doing? Something, like, could get you in trouble at this point.
It's also another example of why you should be involved in a community and, like, not be a hermit, because there are situations I'm aware of, multiple situations where kids were potentially being abused or accused of being abused. In fact, I do know of one where one kid was being abused by a stepfather, and the mom had a good friend who interjected himself, got a couple other people in the community, and actually got the stepfather's brother involved, who was very instrumental in being like, hey, cut this out, this isn't right. What ended up happening is the stepfather ended up, it's essentially being removed from the situation. The guy, I guess, wasn't really stable. And I'm hearing this third person. I only know one of the guys involved in this, but there's definitely situations where, and I've been involved with them too, over the years, where there was some issues going on and people needed some correction. They needed some reassurance. There's been situations where a mom, and a couple of kids had to be, moved out of, a house under some like emergency thing, and they were supported by some friends and family. And, and there was no need for CPS. Everything has turned out fine. The kids never got, put into foster care and diddled by people in foster care, like which tends to happen according to the lawsuits that are paid, the settlements that are paid out by Child Protective Services.
Right, and let me give two specific examples of what I was talking about. So you got a male and a female, and they split. There's a child involved, and they split up. Now, if the male and the female were just dating and she got pregnant, what frequently happens is if she's not a person of means, she will either run to the government for welfare benefits or get a lawyer and sue the guy for child support, and if she doesn't sue the guy for child support, then the government will. But there's no incentive for her to be cooperative or nice to the father of the child in order that he might want to help take care of his child. Instead, she runs to the Big Brother, and Big Brother beats up the father and forces him to do whatever, and that destroys whatever relationship there could be. Even if they're not going to stay together romantically, they still got a kid and they need to cooperate. And then in the other example is if the people are they're married and they've been living together, they got a couple of kids, and they split up. And just about every time there's a split up, it's not usually happy. It's happy time. It's usually there's anger involved. And so, like I said, the angry person will go try to enlist the help of Big Brother, with or without lawyers, in order to beat up on the other person. And looking at it from the male perspective, what happens frequently is withholding of children. The woman gets the child support, and the man wants access to his children. And so one way that like I said, from the male perspective, because I don't happen to be female, the female will frequently, this happens over and over again, will withhold the children, even though she may still be getting child support, and usually is. She'll still play games with visitation. And she's not worried about the neighbors coming and saying, hey, what are you doing? That's his kid, too, which would happen if Big Brother wasn't involved. And Big Brother is not quick to come to the assistance of men who are being denied access to their children by the children's mother.
So one thing I've observed, maybe 50 times, is probably 50 times is not an exaggeration in my life. I was in the horse business, so 90% of my clientele was women. And many, many of these women, had gotten divorced. And yes, if you're dating a girl and she has to have horses in her life, beware.
Why? Because they're crazy?
Because they are, if they need a horse, horses definitely are a good form of therapy for crazy women, crazy people in general. Anyways, so, I don't know how many of these women were they get a divorce, and I'm and I knew their husbands too, and I thought some of them, the husbands weren't all right, some of them were, and I'm and then and years later after the divorce and stuff, I'm like, hey, why did you ever get a restraining order against your husband? And I literally had this conversation with 50 different women in my life.
Wow.
And quite literally 9 times out of 10, or 47 times out of 50, the answer was because my lawyer said if I get a restraining order, it'll look better in the divorce proceedings and I'll be more likely to get what I want out of it.
Oh my goodness.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I got a restraining order against this guy who came to my house and tried to not let me back in because he thinks Ian owes him money. And the freaking judge has to check off all the things he said, that that, like this guy is not allowed to have guns. I didn't ask for that or anything. So like that's checked off. He also checked off a thing that would literally give the guy's kids to me. So he has a child. I guess I could go round up my child I mode if I wanted to. It's just like these judges don't care whose lives they're ruining. They don't care what box they're checking. Anyways, it's been Free Talk Live. You can learn more about us at freetalklive.com and find more episodes there. Thank you for listening. Peace.
Never, ever send a follow-up email asking, "Did you get my email?" Email 101. If it didn't bounce back undeliverable, it got where you sent it. And avoid transmedia pestering, like calling to ask, "Did you get my email?" or emailing to say, "I left you a voicemail." If your emails and voicemails aren't being acknowledged, your problem isn't technology, it's technique. Is your message concise and understandable? Have you boiled it down?